Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for coming so late or so early, depending on your time zone. So my name is Dan Fournier. So if you don't know me, I come from Quebec. I'm a very long time educator, but since about 15 months, I've been working in investigative journalism. I'm completely independent, so I'm based in Quebec. So I write about a whole bunch of things, but I did a big series last summer called Geoengineering and Weather Modification in Canada. And before I get into that, I would just I don't want to forget to thank Bettina for inviting me. And I also want to mention I'm very glad that Jim Lee is here. I'm a big fan, and I don't know to what extent you're familiar, Jim, with geoengineering in Canada, but it'll be great to hear your input. So I'm really happy you're here.
My partner in crime from weathermodificationhistory.com is Dominic Marama, and he is from Canada. He lives in Canada, so he's constantly updating me on all things Canadian.
Yeah, well, it would be great to communicate in the future. I would definitely like to pick your brain because you have a lot more experience in this than me. I'm just kind of I investigate many different things, and I've been kind of looking at this more or less for the past maybe decade, but I really wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive. So maybe I'll just show you all a little bit of just an overview, the three kind of screens or the first screen at least I have from my series, and it links to the other parts because there's going to be 4 parts in all, but there are 3 parts that have been published and they're very long. So I'm obviously only just going to give a very brief overview today. I'm not going to get into too many details, but just maybe some key points for each of the parts and then some other things. So let me try to do a screen share if you're not familiar, just to see what it looks like. So give me a second here. I'll do share screen. Oh, host disabled participant screen sharing. Bettina, can you maybe enable my screen sharing or?
Yeah. I can. Hang on. All right. You are co-host now, and you can start sharing your screen.
Okay, great. I can see now. All right. Okay, so this is the part 1. Can you all see the screen? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right,
Yep.
Great. Perfect. Okay, so you see this date's actually late summer, so early fall, September 29th, or yeah, 29th. So it's called Special Investigation Geoengineering and Weather Modification in Canada, Part 1. Like I said, there's 3 parts published. The 4th part is only going to be for updates and updates on, especially on correspondence, because I've been corresponding with so many different agencies in Canada, Environment Canada, and Transport Canada, and NAV Canada, and a whole bunch. So I'll be posting some updates, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those communications later on. So anyway, this is the cover image I chose for part 1. Most of you are probably, I don't know if you're all familiar with this treaty we have between Canada and the US. I'm sure Jim probably heard about this before.
Yes, sir.
Have you, Jim? Have you heard about this treaty before, Jim, between our 2 countries?
Yeah, Dominic actually has a newspaper article from when it was signed.
Okay, so I don't know if it's just something that's kind of gaining dust on some government shelves there, because I did make some, in Canada, we call them ATI requests or like FOIA requests, and it didn't really result in much, but I'll share a little bit of that later on.
It's very similar to what happened in America with the Vietnam War, what followed, shortly after the Pentagon Papers published by Jack Anderson. We had the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972. And that's when we went into, discussing all these international issues surrounding weather modification, specifically weather warfare. But there were a lot of agreements made internationally. That's why this is circa 1975, because it's shortly after the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972. It's just before the Weather Modification Policy Act of 1976. And apparently, I'm looking at your blog right now, the Weather Modification Information Act of 1985 is probably similar to what we have as the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972. So you got a bunch of great stuff in here. I'm going to have to cover this in a video on my channel.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, it's quite long. I mean, the 3 parts so far, I think, is 245 pages if you were to print it from the browser or something. So it's pretty long. So what I'll do is I'll just give you guys a little bit of a brief to look and feel, and then I'm going to go to like a plain old PPT because there's so much information. It's very hard to find from the 3 different posts, and I don't want to be trying to search for specific information all the time, especially if there are questions. So basically, this is the part 1. This is this post. So I gave it just a general overview because, like I mentioned, I'm a longtime educator. I worked 35 years in education, 22 as a teacher. So I think with this kind of subject where the subject matter is very complex, I like to simplify things as much as possible so the average Joe or average Jane can understand, well, what does that mean, weather modification? What does geoengineering mean? I mean, there's a lot more to it. But here I just give some simple kind of examples with cloud seeding and SAI, so stratospheric aerosol injections. People, people often talk about chemtrails, but it's very important to use the proper terms. It's kind of almost more of a slang term. I talked, it's probably Jim and some of you must be familiar with Julie Diane from Zero Geoengineering. So she said it's very important to try to avoid, especially if you're talking to politicians or if you're talking to, city council members, it's better to avoid these kinds of terms because for them, it just raises red flags. So it's better to try to employ the proper terminology, but sometimes we have to use these terms because they're commonly known. So we use them. So this is a brief overview, and maybe Jim is less familiar with these particular laws in Canada. So there was a treaty that is the cover image there. So this is the 1.66 here treaty, but there's other laws. I'll come back to this in a bit. What I wanted to do is just kind of show a little bit of an overview here. And when I introduce the subject, I want to start with something simple like cloud seeding. Well, what is cloud seeding? So if we go down, and of course here there's links to the other parts too. I'll come back to that later. Maybe you can just have a quick scan here. We have something in Canada called NAV Canada. It's a private entity that controls all our airspace. So we're one of the first, I think we're the first country in the world to have done that, ceded the control of our airspace to a private entity. So there's some stuff going on there I'll talk about a little bit later. Even dive into a little bit of 5G and things like that, not too much. Part three, I focus a lot on the transparency. So I did a lot of communication with different agencies, and some of them are just not being transparent on certain points. They provide a lot of information on certain points, but other points they're like stonewalling me. So I'll show you some examples of that a little bit later. So basically, I give an introduction. What is geoengineering, weather modification? People can read through that. I borrowed some infographics from different sites. There's one simple example I use, and this is because it's from my home province in Quebec. So they had cloud seeding programs that went back all the way to 1960s in an area called Lac Saint-Jean, Quebec, in Quebec province here. And they called it Operation Umbrella, and people can look it up in the Canadian Encyclopedia. So this was a program that was actually, it was deemed like too successful because it resulted in producing too many rain clouds, right? And depriving the local population, particularly children, from sufficient exposure to sunlight, so to natural vitamin D. So backlash ensued, and parents like grumbled about the lack of natural vitamin D, right? Lack of sunshine. And as a result, the Quebec Minister of Natural Resources had to cease the cloud seeding program. So it just goes to show that this has been going on for a long time. I gave some examples of Alberta as well.
Real quick question, Dan.
Sure.
That was the umbrella riots also, right?
I didn't hear about umbrella riots. Do
There-
you mean there might have been some riots related to that
There
operation?
was I saw a photo, and I'm gonna find it real quick because I know it's in our news vault. There was actually, it was called the, oh man, I know that basically everybody went outside to protest this project, and they were all, had umbrellas. And there's a photo of a mass gathering of Canadians, saying, "Please end weather modification." I'll see if I can dig it up real quick.
Did it seem like it was from the 1960s? Was it
It
like
is.
old style footage? Yeah. If ever you have the link, please send it to me. I can always add it in the part 4 too. Because I didn't research this more extensively. Actually, I did a little bit, but I didn't find much. But if you have something related to that, then please feel free to do that.
Will do.
I'm going to switch over to my plain black and white PPT here, so I can just do some highlights from each of the 4 parts. Can you all see this? Is it too small? Should
Yes,
I put it like full slideshow mode? Is it too small?
I can see your screen. Yeah. No?
Okay,
not at all.
Let me put it. Is this better?
It's good.
It's good. All right. I'll go this way instead. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit quick and not too painful because people get tired easily. And feel free to stop me anytime if you guys have any questions. So this is interactive, right? So it shouldn't just be one way. So please do like Jim and go ahead and interject anytime you guys want. So the addresses here, I pasted it in the chat window too, and you can access the other 2 parts. So like I said, from the browser anyway, you can, like, if you do print for each and you add the page totals, it'll be like 245 pages. So it's quite long. The part 4 is not there yet, so I hope to get it. It'll probably be next month because I'm working on another series now, and I'm waiting for a few correspondences as well. But I'll just give a few key points from each of the sections and maybe which subsections you guys should have a closer look at if you want. So like I just showed you on screen, I begin with the different types of weather modification and geoengineering. So cloud seeding, SAIs, SRM. And the contrails versus the chemtrails, the terminology. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that. Since this is really a series focused a little bit more on Canada, so I look at Canada's involvement in the geoengineering. So like I showed you the Quebec example from the 1960s, but there's also examples from Alberta from the 80s, and also they're apparently the only official province that has like these cloud seeding operations. I'm sure there are other ones, but these are the only ones that seem to be declared so far. But in my research, what struck me a lot was Canada's decision not to adhere to the United Nations 2010 geoengineering moratorium. This was basically a moratorium preventing geoengineering activities for countries that basically wanted to protect biodiversity. And most of the countries, I think except the United States and maybe a few others, did not adhere to this moratorium. But I contacted ECCC, so Environment and Climate Change Canada, several times about this. And I pressed them, I think, at least 3 times, maybe 4 times, to ask them why did they not adhere to this, especially given the fact that they're a signatory to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Because in Canada, we're supposed to be, like so nature loving, right? But they never responded. So there you go.
Maybe I'm missing something, but on my screen, I still see your Substack.
Do you see? Yeah, you still see my Substack?
That's all I see.
Uh,
Does anybody else see that?
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, so
I'm just kind of figure what kind of screen we're supposed to be on here.
maybe I could do stop share on this one
yeah,
first.
you
Okay,
need to
sorry
stop.
guys.
Can I share
Okay,
screen
let
for
me
just
go back to my. Can you see it now?
No.
No.
no,
Okay. Well, let me try again.
Bettina, real quick, before he does that, can you give me a screen share real quick just so I can show him something? I think he's gonna like this.
I did. Yeah.
So having 849 newspapers and being able to remember one that randomly is a gift. You guys can see my screen right now.
Yep.
Not yet.
Oh, yep.
Operation Umbrella bans artificial rain, June 26, 1965. And I told you I remembered. Huh?
Jim, we can't see it yet. It's there is still has started screen sharing, but now it's yeah, it's up now.
Okay, you see that? And I said that I remembered seeing a photo of the umbrellas. And then this is it right here.
Oh wow. Oh,
These are the
he was a prime minister.
René Lévesque.
yeah, and the infernal machines.
Before, maybe not at that point. Yeah.
But I have the full screen of it right here. And you can actually see that this is actually a very large image. Whenever Dominic did these, he made them extremely large. So that's full size. And I can see the original. All of these are on the climateviewer.com/newspapers. But yeah, this is an original photo of, and you can see there are people just lying down the street. And it's mostly women. I mean, it's almost exclusively women there. That were protesting Project Umbrella.
Wow. Okay, I'll have to get like these fresh off your website or something. Maybe we can communicate to get the link or something.
One of those random things you brought it up, and I just immediately like, wow.
No, fantastic. I took a couple of screenshots while you were doing that. So I apologize for my lack of my oversight here in using Zoom. I don't use it that often anymore. But let me try to do the share screen. Here we go. I think this will work. Can you all see it now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is what I was showing earlier. I don't know why it's. I guess I was supposed to do the stop screen share on the other one. So let me go back to what I was reading earlier. So some key points from the part one again. So like I said, there was Canada who's not adhering to this United Nations. This is United Nations, right? Moratorium on geoengineering. Yeah, it's a little bit old, 2010, but still, like I said, I corresponded with Environment and Climate Change Canada and 3-4 times, and they never gave me a reason why they didn't want to adhere to it. I post a lot of different photos that I received, because before I made this series too, I kind of made a call to action for my subscribers to submit photos and videos across Canada. So I posted some of them, and I posted a big section on my particular region. I live in a city called Sherbrooke. It's in the eastern townships of the province of Quebec, and I've been taking a lot of pictures and videos since my return, because I worked 13 years in China till late 2021. So I've been documenting a lot of the activity in the skies here ever since. So I post links to I post many photos and links to all the photos and videos, and lots of different styles, some comparative photos and things like that. So for the section 1.6 is the Canadian laws and 3 treaties. So I bolded the kind of important ones. There's the treaty that was the same as the cover image that I showed you guys earlier. And the first 2 are actually quite important in Canada. So the Weather Modification Act and the Weather Modification Information Regulation. So I actually contacted with the with the person in charge of that, and it's kind of a long story, but the details are in part 1 if you want to take a look. The last sections in part 1, and I'm just skipping over some of them. I'm just saying, just showing some of the sections that if you don't have time to look at everything, maybe you can have a look at some of these particular sections. So Appendix C, there's weather warfare, and I probably got a lot of the sites here for the historical sites and all that off of Jim's website. So thank you, Jim, for that. Sorry for piggybacking, stealing links and stuff, but you got great stuff. So I linked
it is literally there for this specific purpose, and I applaud the fact that you actually took the time to first of all read it and second of all share it. I don't want credit for it. This is for the world. So I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. Thank you.
To be honest, I don't do like any justice to your site because you have so many like resources. It's incredible. I mean, there's just too much to put. So I just try to not put too much, you know, but rather put links to some different sites, your sites and other sites as well. And it's good to have a variety of different sources too. So I link to different repositories too, and the patents as well. And I remember I was watching your video from not that long ago, and I don't know if you put it up since on your website, but you had a heck of a like Excel database about all the patents. Is that going to be on your site, or did you already put it there, or is that in the works still?
Well, to be quite honest, after the past after Dane Wigington showed up on Alex Jones InfoWars taking credit for my last patent list, I wanted to make sure that whenever I put this full one, because the new list I have is not just United States patents, it's international patents, some specific to Europe and Canada, but it's several thousand patents. And I'm doing like an interactive browser kind of thing that you can search. So it won't be just a list because it would be 300-400 pages long. And I want to be able to pull the images from the patents and have them visible like as you're, searching through them. So yeah, I'm still working on that, but.
Okay. So yeah, I linked to some of them, kind of the main patents, because like you said, there are like thousands of them, right? So it's but what are the ones that are related to SAIs and this and that? Especially related to the cloud seeding and the SAIs, SRM. So I tried to kind of relate, especially put the patents related to the types of activities that I listed earlier in part 1.
To be fair, like if you were to try to cover everything from like laser exciting air, cloud ionization techniques, marine cloud brightening, and stratospheric Welsbag seeding and cirrus cloud thinning, if you tried to actually put together a list, it would be multiple tens of thousands. So I can only imagine.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to keep it simple, try to relate to the types of activities we're talking about, and to not go into the too technical ones, because otherwise it's just too much for the audience. In part 2, some of the key points, like, I don't know how familiar you all are with NAV Canada, and I didn't even know this before I started researching for this series, is that Canada, I think, was the first country to cede the control of its airspace to a private entity. Okay, so there is cooperation, of course, with the military. So if there's military activities, of course, the military has a certain level of control over certain airspace, depending on what type of activities they're doing, but they do collaborate together. So the Department of National Defense and NAV Canada, but this is a private company controlling all of our airspace. So technically it's in Canada, it's called a not-for-profit corporation. Okay, but some red flags that I've had in researching this organization is, despite the fact that it's a private entity, so anyway, like that can cause definitely some worries, and I'll expand on that a little bit later. Its chairman, Marc Courtois, so he's also CEO of Aeron. This is a company in US. It's also partly owned by NAV Canada, and it has strong ties to US defense companies. And he's also on the board of TVA Group. That's a subsidiary of Québecor. If Jim and some of the others are not familiar with Québecor, they're basically the media in Quebec. So they control most of the media in Quebec, except for the CBC and a few others. So in Canada, Transport Canada is still the regulator. So NAV Canada is the operator, and technically speaking, Transport Canada is still the regulator. So if you want to have flights for cloud seeding or whatever, you need approval from Transport Canada. You can't just go and and do cloud seeding activities or things like that.
Can I make a statement here?
Sure.
Yeah, it's yeah, I've been going all over your stuff there, Dan, for a couple weeks, couple months actually, and then
Thank
of course
you.
I was hanging out with Jim at the beginning of the last year. There, got a lot of information, but just you know. So who gave NAV Canada the authority to poison the atmosphere with toxic chemicals? That'd be my first question. And then, you're talking about somebody's financing the dumping of hundreds of millions of tons of toxic chemicals into our atmosphere to fight climate change. And then this is partial statement from our environment minister, Guilbeault, then saying this will keep our air clean, protect our kids' future. This confirms like Trudeau and Guilbeault are both complete idiots. But that's a statement from Guilbeault. So they obviously gave NAV Canada authority to dump these poisons into toxic chemicals into our atmosphere. How can they literally get away with that? That's criminal negligence.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm going to come back later because I have some kind of recommendations I'm going to put in part 4, because to actually have criminal official investigations into some of these things, because but I mean we could be quick to point out Trudeau and Guilbeault. If you're all familiar with Guilbeault, he's quite the specimen. But anyway,
Yeah,
we won't get into that. But this is this happened a long time ago, if I'm not mistaken. It's written right here on the screen, since 1996. So this has been a long time. This has been over like 30 years now, I guess, or close to 30 years, right? So this has been happening for a very, very long time, as have some of the spraying operations as well. So to me, there just seems to be a big lack of supervision, oversight, and transparency into this organization. So there are a lot of red flags, and I communicated with them a lot. In part 3, you'll see that I have a whole section on transparency. I'm going to come back to them as well later. So this is just to give kind of, I have this in my post. This is in part 2. You can look at it. So it just kind of gives an overview. I think this is one of their latest maps that I took directly from the NAV Canada website. Of course, there's kind of military areas as well, but that's not necessarily in here. So that's a website. You can all go have a look if you want. I communicated with them several times, and I asked information about their ownership, because of course they're a private not-for-profit corporation, so that's a special status here in Canada. So they don't have shares of stock, but they do have bonds. So that means they have bondholders, and it's very, very difficult to come about information. I've seen some issuance of bonds, but this was from many years ago, so the ownership could have easily changed. So I don't know. So I don't know who's the owner. So I asked them many times, and they didn't refuse directly, but they never answered to like who are the owners. Like, we don't know. They could be American military companies. They could be, like, we don't know. There's no transparency. So this is
I mean, they've got their
red flag. So
CEO
there's no
and
accountability then in that case. Go ahead.
their CEO and president, and all that information's public.
Yeah, that information is public for NAV Canada, but like, who owns them? Because we all know that in a corporation, it's usually like the owners or the board members who call the shots, right? So if I don't know who's the majority owner, for example, right? If the majority owner is an American military company, who the heck knows, right? We don't know. Then they could be calling the shots. They could be saying, yeah, you got to carry out these operations. There's no transparency, so that's a red flag for me, and that's something huge. I'll come back to that as well, because I'll come back to that anyway. We'll just put that one on the ice for now. And there's a lot more details about NAV Canada. You can go into part 2 if you want. Also in part 2, there's 2.3. So agricultural considerations and food supply. I guess Nikki and some of the other guests maybe Nikki would know a lot more about this than I do. So, but I do kind of give a little bit of an overview. Section 2.4, pardon my French, what the hell are they spraying and why? I'd encourage people to go and take a look at that section, because that's some pretty deep stuff in there. And I get into a lot of the military operations, and I know that Jim talked about Air Force, is it Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in US, and there's so many like it seems to always come back to them. And there's a lot of different operations, military operations that go back to them, and other outfits in the US. So I mean, yeah, part of it is speculation. It's because it's hard to prove unless you got many declassified documents. There are some. I'm sure that Jim has a lot more than I've come across, but so like, and also I have a whole section, I can't remember, I think it's in part 1, in one of the appendices. I also had, there's many operations they did without the consent of Americans and Canadians too. They did some spraying operations and other operations in the US, and actually affected Canadian regions, and they never informed the citizens. Some of them were military operations, some of them were civilians. So they've been doing a lot of nasty stuff. 2.5 is who's conducting these geoengineering activities. So we got to look at, who are the players. So you can have a look at that one. And the whistleblowers, I chose these 7 particular ones because I think they're quite relevant. And most of them seem quite credible to me. Of course, people can pick and choose. Some are anonymous, or some maybe like for example, Bill Deagle. He's quite the character if you've listened to some of his videos, but he's a smart guy, and he actually predicted a lot of things about COVID in one of his videos that was from like 10, 12 years ago. So he's a smart guy. So you can have a look at Bill Deagle and some of the videos I point to. Ted Gunderson in US, he was FBI special agent on some really like high profile cases, Marilyn Monroe and other very, very high profile cases. And he was quite outspoken fellow. So some of the others you can have a look. I mean, they're quite interesting testimonies in there, quite revealing. Okay, and near the end, I have more appendices. So Appendix E, chemicals, metals, and substances found in spraying. So this section just focuses on what are those chemical elements, or what are those metals. And then 2.9, it's almost a repeat of 2.8. But then what negative effects do you have for each of the particular substances, whether it's aluminum oxide or barium or whatever? And also some subsections there, what are the health impacts? So I linked to a lot of scientific studies and medical studies on the effects of some of these compounds on the brain or on development or on how they can produce Alzheimer's disease or neurological disorders and things like that. And then the effects on animals, natural environment. Talk a little bit about the bees as well in there. So part three is kind of, now we're getting into a little bit more into the transparency. So I have a preamble in there. It's almost like half a rant, if you will. So it's kind of like, do we still have rule of law in Canada? Because we saw, especially during COVID-19, that it seems like they've discarded a lot of our rights and freedoms. So it's a little bit of a rant, but you can look over the preamble to that section that's before all the other sections. So, and 3.1 is, I have a look at transparency surrounding geoengineering in Canada and in the US, but mostly in Canada. Maybe I shouldn't have put in US here. So NAV Canada, so for each of these, I go over some of my correspondence, and I'll give you a link later in a later slide where you can see all my correspondence. I have them all in one folder. You can take a look. It's a little bit messy, but they're all there, and I link to each and every one from my posts. So I have some with NAV Canada, my communications with them, asking about the bondholders, asking about different things. What have they been transparent about? What have they not been transparent about? Same thing with Transport Canada. Same thing with Environment Climate Change Canada and Department of National Defense. I was actually also in contact with a former Royal Canadian Air Force pilot. And so that was interesting because he was kind of like, he was almost thinking I'm nuts that like, these are all contrails. Everything I would try to send to him. No. He would have an explanation. Oh, this is contrails. It cannot be any SAIs or this or that. But
Dan, do you mind if I interrupt for a second?
Challenged though. Go ahead.
There are no shareholders.
There are what?
There are no shareholders for NAV Canada.
That's right. There are no shareholders, only bondholders.
Basically, the board is made up of 4 stakeholder groups. The 10-member board has 4 seats for the air carriers, 1 seat for general and business aviation, 3 for the federal government, and 2 for the unions. And as far as I can tell, there are no bondholders.
But there were issuance of bonds, and either I have them in my notes or I have them in my article. You can I can double check too. I'm going off memory. This is a few months now, but they did have issuance of bonds in the past, unless it was like revoked. But then why wouldn't they tell me in my email correspondence, we have no more bondholders? Then they didn't tell me. So I assume they still have the bondholders, because you can have seats and you can have a board, but that could be completely independent from bondholders. So it's hard to say. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely a different setup, because normally I can dig this stuff up in 5 seconds. But go ahead.
Yeah, I did look through their corporate documents, and I did find things like you were just mentioning, but then I saw some other documents that had issuances with certain financial institutions in Canada that had the bondholders, that had bond issuances that were issued by such and such a financial company, but they were older. So it's possible that maybe later on that they, I don't know, like maybe they bought all those bonds back or something like that. I'm not sure. Maybe there could have been changes, but then why didn't they tell me? If that was the case, why didn't they tell me in the correspondence? It seems like they had something to hide.
Well,
So
it's
that's still
kind of
pending. So
it's back to Ian's point. And what Ian was basically saying, you know, is like, who's responsible? And you know, whether it's the FAA with their, you know, next gen transportation system, whether it's the European Union with what they call Eurocontrol, or whether it's NAV Canada, the governing body that basically allows planes to take off and land, more than likely is completely oblivious. Because, and I want to stress this, because if you look at the original documents that were procured with Bill Gates money from Pfizer, paid to David Keith and Aurora Flight Sciences, and all of the cost analysis done by Alan Robach and, you know, Ben Kravitz, and I could go on for days about this. I keep trying to hone people back to this, you know, this ideology. I mean, we're talking 2004 was one of the earliest cost studies. 2010 was the most prominent, and finalized by 2012. David Keith basically came to the conclusion he only needed 14 Boeing 747s to geoengineer the whole planet, which does not jive with what everybody who's been following the geoengineering / chemtrail / plane fart / call it whatever you want narrative, you know, since I was in high school. The word chemtrail first hit the internet in 1997, you know, when I was 2 years out of high school, which is literally 1 year after NAV Canada was formed. And that first article was about JPA jet fuel. The point I'm trying to make is that if you can't differentiate between stratospheric aerosol injection, i.e., chemicals that end up in the stratosphere, which make the sky whiter, but do not make clouds. And everybody who's been focused on everything, you know, since what in the world are they spraying? The clouds. The clouds are not what Lowell Wood, Roderick Hyde, and Edward Teller were talking about in 1994 at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. They were specifically talking about putting chemicals into the stratosphere to make the sky whiter to reflect sunlight. That is stratospheric aerosol injection. That is solar radiation management. Clouds, whether they're cirrus clouds, whether they're linear contrails that have spread out and made cirrus clouds, or whether they're just chemical dumps of coal fly ash nanoparticles or Morgellons or whatever the hell you believe. I don't really care. That has never been what they were ever discussing doing. So if you can't differentiate between the fact that geoengineers have stated very clearly, we would like to dump about 1 million tons of sulfur into the stratosphere per year, David Keith, I only need 14 planes to do it. And we have around 120 to 150,000 flights per day. So to say that every single plane, or let's just be generous, and let's say 20% of those planes were involved in a geoengineering project would be lunacy. So this is where I think the biggest disconnect happens in these discussions, is that people don't want, people want to shoot the messenger when I say this is mostly pollution we're seeing. It's uncontrolled, unmitigated pollution. It's the most visible climate change there is. It's happening over your house. It happens every day. It's been happening since the 1950s. But geoengineering specifically is the buildup of aerosols in the stratosphere. It is something different. So you have to really differentiate between the troposphere and the stratosphere. And if you're not really focusing on those two areas, what's happening in the stratosphere. The tropopause is the division between the stratosphere and the troposphere. We live in the troposphere. Almost all 90% of flights are in the troposphere. So we have to really look at those two things. And back to what I was originally saying with Nav Canada, if David Keith were saying that he only needed 14 planes to geoengineer the whole damn planet, he could literally do that from a private airfield in Arizona and affect the entire globe. So to say that he would have to disclose that to Nav Canada or the FAA or Eurocontrol, no, they would never disclose that because national security. And at the same time, we're only talking 14 to it, the very high, at their largest assumption, 50 planes. So if they're talking between 10 to 50 planes, then we need to be looking at what's the bigger picture of all of the other flights that we're seeing and the uncontrolled, unmitigated damage to human health caused by nanoparticulates, which are, sprayed into the flames of a spinning turbine, and 1 gigaton of black carbon per day of, just from 747s. And those, and all of the metals, all of the other chemicals, the black carbon that's coming out of planes wrapped in graphene, literally graphene laminated black carbon particles. These are the things that I don't hear anybody discussing, the differentiation between pollution and intentional geoengineering.
Can I add something to that? Jim, you were talking about all those coal fly ash ponds that line the riverbanks all over the United States. So those are waste ponds. How are they going to get rid of that waste? Are they actually dumping that into our atmosphere to get rid of that waste? That would make
absolutely. I mean, the idea, I've heard it. J. Marvin Herndon is a quack. I don't mind being controversial. I don't pull no punches. He don't like it, he can come down to Sumter. I'll beat his ass. We've had this conversation on the phone. He called me after getting his ass kicked by the peer-reviewed journal guys 3 times, asking how he could refrain. And I said, dude, if you stop saying coal fly ash and you said black carbon, if you just literally copy pasted black carbon every time you said coal fly ash, your paper would be scientifically correct and nobody'd be able to discount a damn thing you're saying. The coal fly ash problem is the same problem as the nuclear waste problem. It is just built up and they don't know what to do with it. The idea that you could put it into fuel tanks or into special tanks and then disperse it everywhere, it would probably take 40,000 planes flying every single day to keep up with the number of coal-fired power plants that are on the planet today, not to mention all the ones that are China's building right now, that Africa's building, that India's building. So this is the waste products that build up. I have heard, talk of using that as a source for, extracting carbon, for carbon nanotubes, for making graphene. I've looked at all sorts of things that they've tried to say, hey, we could do this with coal fly ash. But the only place coal fly ash is found coming out of a engine that I know of, that I've ever seen actually studied, was out of international shipping tankers. And that was because they were burning bunker fuel or heavy fuel oil. And that coal fly ash was found in ship tracks over the Pacific Ocean. That is the only place. And I gave that reference to Herndon. He conveniently didn't freaking use it, which is a head scratcher for me. So at the end of the day, like, the coal fly ash theory was invented by a guy named the Harp Report on YouTube. and you can go look at the original video. Chemtrails are coal fly ash. He did a whole PowerPoint presentation on it. Then he went on to talk about an Air Force base where they were secretly pumping the coal fly ash into the planes. And this is a dude with no name, no face, would never take a phone call, would never take an email. And when I called him out on his bullshit, he promptly disappeared off the internet. It's just not a thing, in my personal opinion. I could be wrong, you know, but that's where I stand on it. If you did put it in the jet fuel, it would clog up the fuel injectors before you could get the plane off the ground, because of the structure and the size of coal fly ash, its chemical composition. It makes zero sense. Now, they have said multiple times, let's use biofuels and let's put crushed nanoparticles of aluminum in the biofuels, just like you'd put an octane booster in your fuel tank of your car. You've seen those guys with the muscle cars, and they put the little octane booster in there. It's the same idea. Crushed nanoparticles of aluminum. Aluminum burns at an extremely high temperature. It adds thrust. So yeah, they talked about using the J-Tropha plant spiked with nanoparticles of aluminum in the jet fuel. Nanoparticles, not, greater than 2.5 micron size coal fly ash lumps, which would never work. It's just theoretically dumb. One coal fly ash pond just at one site, and I think it said 242,000 tons at just the one site annually. So, I mean, that's just an insane amount. That would be more than the gas. If you added up just the coal fly ash ponds in America, it would be more than all of the jet fuel, barrels used annually in America. So it would be more than all the jet fuel. It's just theoretically impossible.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I did come across some data also on how much coal fly ash there is. It's pretty crazy. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, at least for my part, for the different arguments and the nomenclature that people use, right? Whether it's coal fly ash or black carbon or whatever. But I think Jim made two important points. And the first one is to differentiate, well, what's happening in the troposphere and what's happening in the stratosphere, right? Where you said troposphere has 90% of the flights. Also, I think in my part one, I put a few infographics to explain the different layers as well of the atmosphere. Just to kind of simplify for the users. And of course, the solar radiation management and all that's supposed to happen in the higher levels, right? But one key word that Jim said earlier was disclosure. Okay, so what is being disclosed, by NAV Canada to Transport Canada, to Environment Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, right? What's being disclosed? Do they really know? All about all these operations, and some of these can be covert operation. Of course, we don't have all the information. Without serious access to records, sometimes we have no choice but be left to speculation. Without transparency. So that's what makes it really, really difficult and challenging and I've been pushing these agencies, I'll show you the link later, and I've been including the military in Canada, to try to get answers. And the military actually hasn't been, they're probably the least transparent. The other ones, I got fairly good correspondence with the others, but I'm sorry?
Can I just quickly add something to this, Dan?
Sure.
I know that, I know that you mentioned our FOI to Transport Canada in your part 3. Thank you very much for this. And yeah, you're right. It is really interesting, the information you get or you don't get. Remember this FOI that you put in your part 3 here?
I'm going to expand on that in my PPT in just a few minutes. I'm going to expand on that very specifically. If you,
yeah,
I
well,
will.
yeah. So we also filed an FOI to Environment Canada a long time ago. It was back in, I believe it was in August of last year. We still don't have it. It is, I mean, it's very detailed. It's a very, very detailed FOI, but we still have any answers. So they are struggling with that. You know, I think they do know, they exactly where we are coming from. And, you know, that now that we I really dug deep into this, and it's very, very detailed. So as soon as I got the response and I got the FOI, I will share this with you because it's interesting. Okay. They are not coming back to, or not getting back to us with the information. Yeah, so you're right. There is no information between these you know, Transport Canada and Environment Canada happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I followed up with those two agencies on your ATI, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I think it's in the next slide, maybe, or one of the coming slides here. Just before that one, there's one other one. So I did an ATI request to Global Affairs Canada. So they're the ones that are responsible for the treaty that I mentioned that's in the opening image of the part 1 that we talked about earlier. So I did an ATI request to them. So this is the text of the request. You're very limited with the space. And I always do these ATI requests. I do them on physical paper and I write them down and I mail them, because otherwise you have to register online and they want all your private information. And I say, screw that. I don't want to give all my private information. So I do it on paper. It's 1 page. I put the information. I want the electronic copies. I put my email address. I put the $5, put it in the envelope, and I send it out. And that's how I do my ATI request. So I can don't have to give all that private information. And I do encourage people to do that at the end of part 3 as well. I'll come back to that. So this was basically, you can all read what I was asking for here. So I wanted to know about weather modification activities in Quebec. Okay, and basically that's the answer in the red box here. So no records relate, which I think it doesn't make sense, because it doesn't match with the reality of what we're seeing in the skies here. So, and what I've documented in part 1. So I don't know if they're just not keeping records. Are they being maybe they have records but they're not sharing them? Like, it's very hard to say. So anyway, that's the information I have, so I'm relaying it.
So there's a place called NASIC DECA. That's NASIC DECA. NASIC DECA is a member of Weather Modification Association, which is based out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is the repository of all weather modification research and report logs for the United States military. So likely the agreement between Canada and the United States for exchange of information particularly pertains to Wright-Patterson's requests for any and all information for the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And it really goes to show it when you see the Weather Modification Association and its list of members literally writes out NASIC DECA Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Can you spell that again, NASIC? I want to
It's
make sure
NASIC space DECA. It's all caps, so it's an acronym.
Okay. Okay, I'll have to research that a little bit. Do you think that maybe like one reason I didn't get any records is this could be because it's military, so it could be top secret or it could be confidential? Do you think that could be a reason?
Because it's an international treaty, it more than likely is government to government. You probably would have got more response if you actually looked into the Reporting Act of 1985 to find if they're actually. I haven't read the law, but according to our law, our Weather Modification Reporting Act in 1972, in order for somebody to do weather modification activities, geoengineering or otherwise, they must fill out a NOAA Form 17-4, and they have to file it with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So they have to fill out a initial and then an intermediate / final report. So the initial report says, I'm going to modify the weather at this location, at this time, using this apparatus, using these chemicals for this long in this wide an area. Those forms are, fall under the statutes, Public Law 92-205. So similarly, your Weather Modification Reporting Act, if you would file what we call FOIA, I don't know what you guys call it, I guess ATI. So Freedom of Information Act request here. If you did an ATI to, the governing body that runs that statute, then you might be able to get access to actual weather modification reports that were submitted in accordance with the law. Whereas this is more in superficial reading the title and, just knowing how, it's very similar to like NSA. Have you ever heard of Oz, Kanzukis, or the Five Eyes?
Yeah, Five Eyes, of course.
Yeah, so Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, UK, Oz, Kanzukis was the original term for the Five Eyes. They have a signals intelligence sharing agreement, meaning any of the spy information that's gathered in Canada or US, UK, New Zealand, or Australia, the Five Eyes, they all share it over a network called the Stone Ghost Network to the NSA headquarters in Utah.
Can you say that again? Stone Ghost?
Stone Ghost. It's
Stone
on climate.
Ghost.
Yeah,
okay.
All one word, all caps. You can read about it on climateviewer.com/privacy. Okay. All the information on it and the entire history of the New World Order is on that page. So it's very similar to that kind of setup where they have a signals intelligence sharing agreement between the 5 countries. This would be an informational sharing agreement between the 2 countries. Okay. So it's not likely that it's more of a, Bob Dole is doing cloud seeding in Alberta, at such and such time. It would be more of a, our government funded research into this, over these number of months or years. And here's, the peer reviewed journal results from that. This is not going to be published in a journal. It's internal, things like that. Okay. It's likely more informational, like scientific, government funded, that sort of thing. Just in my personal opinion, reading it superficially. I have another obligation I have to take off for. But I did drop those 3 links to the umbrella images in chat.
Oh, great.
For you.
Thanks.
So you can just click right on those. Feel free to download those images and use them as you feel free. Everything on, climateviewer.com is Creative. It was Creative Commons till Ian pointed out that Creative Commons is run by, what's that son of a bitch's name? Tell me, Ian.
George Soros.
That's right. Can I tell a quick story before I go? Because it's hilarious. So Ian reaches out to me and we want to share some information. And then I'm going, armed security guard. I'm going to get qualified, on a different gun. So I'm literally over in the neighboring county. I've driven an hour I'm at, Palmetto State Armory, getting ready to go in and shoot. And I get a call, text from Ian. He's like, I see you work with George Soros, so F off. And I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Like, mind blown. Okay. And then he goes, well,
one.
you know that Creative Commons license that you have on all of your pages, that's from George Soros's club, and I won't have anything to do. And then I was like, son of a bitch, I didn't even realize that. Yes. What's the name of the group? Remind me. The group that's behind. I can't remember. Right now.
Also, I know is they tag on the well, they tag like George Soros's Open Society. What they do,
that's what it is. It's Open Society.
So what they do is they tag onto websites and they pick off donations. They'll actually plant themselves next to a donation button, and you wind up wanting to donate to Climate Viewer or Dan Fournier or whatever, and you'll accidentally hit the wrong button. You'll wind up donating to George Soros's Open Foundation Society. Believe it or not, it's like a parasite.
They can't do that on my website because I'm a hacker coding genius. But yeah, like after I promptly cussed him out for insinuating that I had anything to do with Soros because I hate the guy. But then after I went inside and, put a bunch of bullseyes in the target because I was really mad, I came outside and sat in the parking lot for the next 30 minutes going, son of a bitch, he's right. And I went home that night and took Creative Commons off of now everything says copyright Jim Lee, Climate Viewer, screw, all that. But yeah, it's still open source. We'll just use that term. So feel free to use any of that stuff and screw George.
So that was a valid complaint. In other words,
yes.
What you're saying. Okay.
I may spit a little fire at first, but I love being challenged. And I applaud the fact that Ian was willing to challenge me. I think he went about it a little rashly, because accusations can lead to confrontation. But hell, I love confrontation.
Put it that way, it's warranted.
You got
warranted.
You got me. Good shot.
Hey, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm just glad I helped you out because I mean, you've got you got a ton to offer the world here. You don't need somebody leeching off your material.
Well, I don't want any association with that son of a bitch that wants to destroy every nation's sovereignty.
Yeah, he gets his money all kinds of ways. I'm sure they're just out there fishing. Like it's just like a big ocean out there, and he drops a line here, there, and everywhere. Right?
Just a heads up, his son is more politically active than he was. And his son is a big climate change guy. So don't be surprised when George Soros's son, who's now in charge of all the money, starts to fund geoengineering studies and things like that. Guaranteed it's going to happen. Well, but Tina, before I go, please send me a copy of this video. I will definitely upload Dan's entire presentation to my channel so that more people see this.
Wow.
And I'll give links so back to your Substack as well.
Wow, that's very kind of you.
Jim, no hard feelings on that one. By the way, I mean
none whatsoever, dude. I love it.
I knew it would take time to get over that one.
I know. I would rather. I'm gonna tell you that straight up to anybody. I would rather you call me on my bullshit and have the stones to do it than be a coward and talk about me behind my back. I have more respect for you now because you did that. So bravo, Ian.
Okay, man. Yeah, Jim, I love your work. Dan, I love your work too. It's great. I think you two could, bring a lot of I think
when I get Dan in touch with Dominic, it's gonna be on like Donkey Kong, because Dominic is, he lives in Canada. Every single one of those newspaper articles were created by Dominic. And there's 849 of them. So between you two, I think, you know, you're the nerd that'll actually write everything down like me. And Dominic definitely can find anything on the internet similar to me. So I think that you two, I'll definitely be getting y'all in touch with each other.
Oh,
Dominic called me about an hour ago. His computer's broken right now, so he's having a hissy fit, and I need to go fix it. But guys, thanks for having me, and I want to see the rest of this. So, Bettina, please send me a download link or something.
Yeah, good to see you, Jim.
All right,
Great.
Dan, great work, man. I can't wait to see the rest of it.
Oh, thank you so much. I learned so much from you. So just what you gave me, I took some notes, and I'll definitely look at some of this for my part 4 too. I need to dig into a little bit deeper into this. Just a quick question: when you said that you were referring to like the statute, that we should make the request to the right agency, and you mentioned a Reporting Act of 1985. Is that in the U.S. or is that in Canada?
In Canada. That was your law. I remember it from your slide earlier.
Oh, okay. You mean the Weather Modification Act, you mean?
Yeah, it says Weather Modification Information Act, which sounds...
the reporting, the second one. Okay, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because...
Where any person proposes to engage in weather modification activities in Canada, that person shall, in such form and manner as prescribed, submit to the administrator, whoever the administrator is who you need to get in touch with, such information as may be prescribed, respecting that the person and the weather modification activities in which proposed engaged before commencing weather. This is identical. The purpose of the activity, the equipment, the geographic area, that's what you need to be doing to get that information.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think for that one, it was Diane Campbell, and I did contact, and I did have correspondence, and later I'll have the links to my correspondence as well, because she's been in office for like 40 years or something, and this is like pretty long. I had a very like polite letter I sent at the beginning, so I'll refer to that if I'm not mistaken, that's the one. But yeah, because the treaty is Global Affairs Canada, and now we have a different entity. So sometimes you have to make sure you write to the correct.
Oh, they'll throw it out. I mean, you miss one letter on these sorts of things, they'll go, you asked the wrong people the wrong question, so no files exist. But if you ask the same thing, you know, reports and notices of weather modification activities to that entity, then it would be exactly what you're requesting.
But I remember for that act, it took me a long time. I had to actually do 2 other emails to find out who was the administrator, because it wasn't on any of their websites. It wasn't properly clearly stated. So I had to communicate, can you confirm who is your like administrator? And then I finally got it. Was this, I think it's, I'm not mistaken, is Diane Campbell, but I'd have to, I think it's in part 1 or part 2. I'll have to recheck that.
Real quick story before I go. Same thing happened here in America. So we had the law. Rosalind Peterson was the one who actually contacted the officials at NOAA and got the reports. And the reports were very generic. They just gave, names of companies and, times of the year that they did weather modification activities. And I actually built the maps on climateviewer.org of weather modification activities 2004 through 2012, I believe, based off of the FOIA request that she did to NOAA. Since then, and that was back when the only place you could even get the NOAA form was on corporateservices.noaa.gov. Now there's actually a open website that publishes every single report live. So, or at least quarterly, let's put it that way. So now all of those are obtainable by the public on NOAA's website without having to do a Freedom of Information Act request. I would put in there when requesting that, the public should have a right to access these without, going through all this rigmarole Why are these not published on an online database that you could just search? It's not just the government sky. It's not, nobody owns the sky.
Yeah, they make it difficult. Like the I don't know if it's the same with FOIA, but the ATI request, there could have been a request for what you were asking before, and then you could do a search in their engine and they say, oh yeah, there's a report. So they give you a number, but then you have to make a request to get that report, which was already published. Why didn't they just like put it on their database? And make it accessible right away? So it's another hurdle. Another thing they do when they send you the PDF of 300 pages, they send it all in image form, so you can't do a damn search for text, and it drives me nuts. You have to go through the damn the 300-page report to try to scan for the keywords you're looking for and the information. They use all kinds of tactics in Canada. They're really bad. I don't know how bad they are in the US.
You need to get a good computer. You need a good computer with OCR capabilities, maybe even artificial intelligence, and then you can actually turn all those images right into words.
Yeah, I need a special software to convert them, so save time.
Well, keep up the good work. I look forward to seeing the rest of it, and you guys have a great night.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, bye.
See you next time.
Thank you, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, Bettina. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, we keep in touch.
Okay, so I'm glad Jim asked for the rest of the presentation, because yeah, the other ones I'm going to show in just a second here are quite relevant. But does anybody have any questions before I proceed? Anybody, including you, Bettina? Like, I don't want to like monopolize the presentation here, but if anybody has any questions, go ahead.
Go ahead. Absolutely. It's great.
It's all good. All right. Like I said, you can interrupt me anytime if you guys have any questions. So another one in the transparency part, and the first part of part 3.1 was, this one is not labeled 6. I forgot to put the number, but it's written access to information request to transport Canada. Sorry, I can't see my whole screen here because I have a little bit of my screen is blocked there. But I followed up with your ATI request, Bettina, that you were talking about earlier. This is the one that was the 162-page report that they sent to you in French, even though you asked it in English. So that's another tactic that they use, right, to kind of make things miserable. And you asked, if I'm not mistaken, for the whole country, but they only gave you for Quebec, right?
Yeah, we did ask for number one in English, because why would we ask for something in French when we are here in BC? That's number one. And number two, we asked for all of Canada, just for Quebec.
Yeah, so it's very sus, right? It's very suspect. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know who, like, sometimes they have like junior agents that, because in my correspondence, sometimes I have junior agent information officer, and maybe they give more, and the more senior ones they give less. It's very strange, but anyway. So here, this report that you sent, if the other audience members are not familiar, you are asking for information about basically spraying programs, or not specifically spraying, but some programs going on. So the only result that was provided, there were a bunch of letters of correspondence that were essentially showing massive spraying programs that were taking place in the province of Quebec. In the next slide, I'll show you the specific regions they were doing this, and this was from like over 10 years. Over 10 years, you can see here, from April 15, 2009 to late 2021. So these letters were produced by Transport Canada. Remember earlier I said Transport Canada is the regulator. So if there are some spraying programs, cloud seeding or whatever, they have to get permission by the regulator, not the operator, not Canada, the regulator, Transport Canada. So they have to say, like what kind of plane they use, and what's their like flight plan, flight details, where they flying from, how long is it going to take, do they have insurance, are they follow all kinds of requirements, very, very strict requirements. Here, so basically they were saying, because it was in French, I had to translate it. So they were saying I can't see the whole screen here, but the translation in French, opération de d'épandage. I think my screen is blocked there, but I think it says épandage de produits. So it's basically spraying operations of substances. Okay, so over various regions of Quebec, which I'll show in the next slide. But the main thing to retain here is the purpose, the substances used that they sprayed, and the operator of these sprayings are not disclosed. Because I had a correspondence with I think it's Transport Canada regarding cloud seeding operations in Alberta. They were transparent about it. You know, they said which substances, silver iodide, and that they were using. So they were transparent with the substance. And it was Weather Modification Inc., if I'm not mistaken, the company that was doing the spraying operation. So they were more transparent. But here they give Zippo, they give nothing. Okay, so how do we know what they're spraying? Did people even give consent to that? So there's a whole bunch of issues here that are not addressed. And I pressed them many, many times to get information, and I'll show you the link to all the correspondences later. You know, I always try to keep it polite and cordial and ask for this information, being very professional. You know, because we have to be. That's how things are done. But you know, they're not being forthcoming. So that's the purpose of this post here in section 3.1 is to hold them a little bit more to account, and then try to ask for more transparency and show when they're not being transparent. So these are the regions. My particular region is not here. But of course, like I mentioned, I worked a long time and many years in China. I only came back in late 2021. So I don't know the previous years if these operations were happening specifically here, or there were spraying operations here. I don't have a record of that, so it's hard for me to say. Here's another one another request that I made. So I wanted to know a little bit more specifically for my region in Quebec. I live in the Eastern Townships. Sherbrooke is a city about an hour and a half east of Montreal, just to give you an idea. So I wanted to know in basically the same time period, right? So from 2009, and a little bit later than 2021, so up to 2023, I wanted to know if there were any spraying operations conducted here. And I specifically stated here in this last sentence, please do not redact the names or the companies involved, because the ATI request, if I go back to the previous page, this report, 162-page report, there's redactions in there. You do not see the name of the operator, right? The airline conducting these, or what the substances are. So I specifically asked them not to redact these. But so here's what happened. Basically, the first response here, I put a hyperlink, but they're in. You guys can make a screenshot or take a picture if you want. Here, this is another server I have, Liberty Academy .org/geoengineering/communications. They're all there. So people can read the first response here. They sent to me. It's just an email reply. And they sent me a release package, which is a PDF document. And this was just the sloppiest thing you've ever seen in your life. It was a mumbled mishmash of incoherent, different people from different departments in Transport Canada, kind of like tossing the ball at each other. What do you know? What do you know? What is this? Do you approve this? Do you approve this? And it's really messy, and it's very incoherent. And I had to send another another reply, can say, look, I mean, I think my original request, which you see here in green, is quite clear. It's not rocket science, okay? So you can get people to answer these questions, right? Well, or can't you? Like, so it was pretty ridiculous. So then they send a second response, and this time they made it short and sweet, and oh, sorry, we have no related records to this. So to me, that seems very, very unlikely. So sorry, but they're definitely not being transparent about something, because that it doesn't match with the evidence I presented in section 1, at least for here asked till 2023, but there's definitely some spraying operations going on since late 2021, because I've been documenting it thoroughly since that time up to present day. I take photos and videos of here. The occurrence of the spraying in my region is about, it varies a little bit. At the beginning it was about 3-4 times per week, and then more recently in the last 6 months it was about 4 or 5 times per week. And it seems like, I don't know, in the last month it seems a little bit less frequent, maybe 2-3 times per week that I see spraying operations. So it varies a little bit, but the last about 7 or 8, 9 months it was probably about 4 or 5 times per week, a good 4 or 5 times per week. So I had another ATI request with an inquiry about flights with transponders being off, because in the video that Jim made, that Bettina, you sent me the link for, where he's kind of like debunking or kind of criticizing some things about Dane Wigington, because I was using 2 flight tracking programs to try to track flights. So whenever they're spraying outdoors here, I would use the Flight Aware and Flight Radar 24. But sometimes I would see like some flights, and I know where my local airport is here, and I can type in the airport code, and I'm only about less than 15 kilometers from the airport, and I know exactly what direction they're in. So when flights are flying above, I know where they are relative to the airport. So they should show up on these flight tracking programs. But some of them, and here I corresponded also with the RCAF pilot, because there's specific rules. He sent me some documents that I link also in, I can't remember if it's part 2 or part 3, of the rules about transponders. And I have rules from NAV Canada also, and some other documents. So I cite the specific pages, and I have like screenshots of specific pages about the rules for transponders and things like that. So transponders, if you're not aware, what that means is the airplanes have a communication that automatically sends data on their altitude and some other flight information. And these flight tracking sites like Flight Aware, I think it's flightaware.com, flightradar24.com. You can Google if you want the correct address. Some of these flights were not showing up, and because some of flights are military flights, and some military flights, although technically they're supposed to leave their transponders on as well, they don't always do it. So there was another one that I was listening to Jim's on his video. He said there's another one that has all the military flights included with the civilian flights, and it was ABS Tracker or something like that. If you guys want, just remind me later, and I can cut and paste the address in the chat window, because I do recommend at the end of my part 3 that people should kind of track the flights, like if they see spraying operations or things like that above their vicinity, especially if they're close to an airport, then they can track, they can literally see, if they know where they are, they can see like which flights could be emitting these long trails and so on. So anyway, that was an ATI request for that, and there was something else in there. But like 40 days later, no reply. So this is from Transport Canada. So I sent another inquiry. Well, that one 40 days later from my original request. 40 days later, no answer. I sent them, and they have yet to reply. So to me, they're definitely concealing something. Okay, because they're not saying, oh, we don't have anything, or they're just not answering. So okay, maybe it could be one time, there could be an oversight or something like that. Maybe the email got lost. But this is I sent 2 more. Here I only put 1 on the screen, but I put 2 more. replies to try to press them to get answers. No answers. So
Yeah,
at the end
same
of
here.
the,
Same here
go ahead.
with our second same here with our second FOI to Environment Canada. I sent 3 follow-up emails to them already. Like I say, we filed this back in August, and we still have no reply, no nothing, no documents, no absolutely nothing. You know what also could be, which I kind of appreciate, actually, the more we bombard them, obviously they understand now, they see, well, oh, there is people that are interested in what we are doing here, and maybe that's also or could be a reason why there is such a delay in their reply. Who knows? Good news, actually, but on the other hand, we certainly want this information, right?
Yeah, and I put actually more pressure on it. I'm not afraid to, because I don't know if I have the link here, because I have the part of my screen is blocked there too. But what I do too is I tell them, look, I need this information because I'm going to publish my part 4 in January or whatever, right? And I think the Canadian people have a right to know. And your response or non-response is going to be in my article, so I'm trying to give them a little bit extra incentive to, push them to give the information, because they might think that, oh, if we're just communicating between us, if we don't give it, then nobody's going to know about it. But I'm sorry, but my readers are going to know that they're not being transparent. And that was the purpose of the whole section 3.1. So people can go look at the transparency. And
Right.
I'll give you the link too in the next slide or so of all my communications. And like I said, I'd be very professional, be very polite, be very thankful, even if nothing comes up. Okay, well, thank you, whatever their name is. Thank you for your help, and I appreciate it. But I'm not going to start yelling at them or anything. That's no use doing that. So at the end of this section, so what do we know? Okay, so this is a kind of a summary in a way of not just part 3, but almost like part 1, part 2, and part 3. So it's almost like, and we've been in correspondence with a lawyer on a particular case, and when you present information like in a court of law, you present some statements of facts. So what I wanted to do is, okay, I don't want to put any speculation at all whatsoever. So I only put the statements of facts, okay? So statements like, for example, okay, in Quebec, there's Operation Umbrella that took place about cloud seeding, or these other operations are taking place, and it's just all point by point, all the facts, basically. So inventory of the statements of facts, okay, of what's going on, what we know, and also what is not answered. For example, NAV Canada, we still do not know who owns them, who are the bondholders. Okay, they're not being transparent. We don't know. So, and other ones as well. I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of the summary here, but you can go look at the point. They're probably about 15 or 18 points or something like that. So these are some that you could even present in a court case or in a court of law, because they're not speculation at all. They're just statements of clear facts, and a lot of them relate to ATI requests too. So what do we know, and what should we know? So what are some of the big missing pieces? Okay, so people can go look at that particular section. Then I finish off, well, here I want to do a little bit of solution journalism here, right? So I want to try to get the audience a little bit more reactive. Okay, so what can the average people do? So here is just a quick summary, but I have a little bit more description with links and different things you can do. You can contact your elected representative or representatives. I should have put that plural. You can make ATI requests. Anybody in Canada can make ATI requests. It's so complicated to do the online version. So I put a link to the PDF form that you can print and tell them, okay, you can print this form. You click on this link, this website, and it'll tell you which agency, what's the privacy officer, because when you do an ATI request, you need to do it to the is it not the privacy officer, the access to information officer. Okay, so each Transport Canada has one, and Global Affairs Canada has one as well. And they give you the name of the officer and the address and the phone number and the fax and all that. But you basically need the name and you need the address. So anybody in Canada can make the ATI request. The only thing is that you have to put $5 bill in there if you're going to do it like that. If you don't want to pay, you could probably do it online for free, but then you'd have to give up a lot of private information, which to me, it's not worth it. But did you want to say something?
Well, that's what I did when I sent in our FOI request. Then I mailed this to them and put a $5 bill in there.
That's right. It's simple, right? I'm old school. I'm an old guy. I'm old school, so I like doing things the old-fashioned way. Because like fighting with online like systems, and they're buggy and like this, that, and then you get the runaround, and I have no patience for that. Okay, other things people can do: take water, soil samples, and get them tested. So I linked to a particular lab in BC. But there are labs all around the country, all around Canada. So those are things you can do. You can get detailed reports. Use the flight tracking software. I mentioned Flight Aware, Flight Radar 24, and I think it's ABS Tracker, the one that Jim recommended that includes military flights. If you find out like where's your closest airport, or maybe you're between two airports, you have to figure out on the map where you are if you're trying to track flights. It's a little bit more difficult maybe if you're in a region like the downtown Toronto or Montreal. then you might have a lot of traffic. But if you're in a place where I live, there aren't that many flights, so it's not too difficult to locate and pinpoint flights. I gotta wrap this up because I'm losing my voice already, but I'm almost done here. So another thing you can do: write or call your local member of parliament. Ask for answers. Ask them if they're aware. And when you do, don't avoid using words like chemtrails or things like that. Use SAI, SRM. Use the proper terminology, because if you use chemtrails, they're all instructed to just dismiss that altogether, and they'll just say, "Oh, it's just contrails." So you gotta write it professionally, in a sense. So here, basically, I'll maybe end the screen share soon here, and I'll cut and paste this address in the window. So here you can have access to all my communication, and you can see my letters and their replies. I kind of put the replies, paste them in Word, and save them as PDF just to make it a little bit easier to read. So that's basically what people can do. So just kind of personal thoughts, observations. Okay, and here's going to be on a more speculative side. People can have their own opinions, do your own research. But from my research, limited research, I'm not as I'm not as privy to all the different programs as somebody like Jim. But from my personal observations and research, I think there's a massive covert solar radiation management program taking place in Canada. That's my opinion. Concern about flights. I have a very deep concern about flights with transponders off. I've filmed many of them. I've taken photographs, not just of the planes in the sky, but the ABS tracker or the Flight Aware programs. Take a picture. Sometimes I take video of the plane in the sky and leave the video on and come right to my screen. And sometimes there's no plane. Okay, there's no plane. So that means that the transponder's off. So that's illegal in Canada. So I asked actually the Department of Defense, the Royal Canadian Air Force at different bases, Transport Canada, I gave them specific flights, specific dates. Didn't hear anything, no response, nothing. So these are highly suspicious. And another thing I think is going on is I think this is not necessarily just military planes. I think they're regular airline aircrafts, because a lot of a lot of times I'll film and I'll take pictures of like massive trails that go clear across the sky, like 10, 20, 30 kilometers. And then I'll look in the flight programs, and they're like Air Canada Rouge. Okay, here's a couple. I put specific examples here. Flight 1529, 1545. These were from a month or so ago. UPS, Flight 213, and many, many more. I have many other examples. I'm probably going to maybe publish some in the part 4 and put more information and say, like, hey, here's what I observed. Here's what I saw. Anybody want to correct me? If Department of National Defense or Canadian Air Force Transport Canada want to correct me, you're welcome to do so. Provide flight information about these. How come, like, provide the information? Because, like, to me, it doesn't add up. NAV Canada, they could be facilitating these spraying operations. We don't know. There's no transparency. That could very well be. Where's the accountability? Where's the transparency? So, like, I think, like Jim mentioned earlier too, like disclosure. Is there disclosure? Is there real disclosure between NAV Canada and Transport Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada? Maybe they just don't know. Maybe they're being completely honest, Transport Canada, Environment, Climate Change Canada, because they don't know what's going on. Maybe that's possible. Okay, who knows? Part 4, I'm thinking, I'm not the shy type. You'll see in my correspondence. I am really seriously thinking about writing open letters to the RCMP and to the Quebec, Sûreté du Québec, the Quebec Provincial Police, to look at, for the Quebec Provincial Police, it would be specifically to look into, Bettina, your ATI request about the sprayings over Quebec, because we have these sprayings that took place for 10 years. We don't know the purpose, we don't know who did it, and we don't know the substances. There should be an investigation into this. The reason I would want to make these open letters is because if I just, like I said before, if I just do it between me and them, they'll probably just ignore it. But if I do an open letter, then maybe they'll feel a little bit more obligated to respond. And whatever they respond, I would post it on the website. I'll be transparent myself. Whatever they respond, I'll put it. So I think there should be formal investigations into these unresolved issues and the lack of transparency by some of the agencies, not for all the topics, but for some specific topics like the transponders or other things that they did not answer me, and especially NAV Canada. So that's, I think, basically it for this. Let me do a stop share here, and I will just cut and paste the address, and then I'll take some questions. So let me just cut and paste this address here. Just give me a second here if I can find the chat window. Where's the chat window?
So Dan, I will forward you our request to Environment Canada. I put it in a PDF, and then I will also put that on the website for everybody that who's interested. I can will share this as well, because it's very, very detailed. Maybe this will help you as well to figure out or find out about the substance, have a different way of approaching it. But then I'll put, like I say, I put that on the website, and I will send you the PDF as well in an email.
Okay. Maybe I'll just do one quick little screen share here. If I let me go here. Can you guys see here?
Yeah.
Can you see index of geoengineering? Okay, because
Yes,
the link can you see it? No?
Yeah, I can see it on screen.
Okay, do you see like the first document? It says Administrator Assistant Deputy Minister Diane Campbell?
Yes.
Can you all see that? So if I click here, for example, Okay, so here's the one I was talking about earlier. This lady, Mrs. Campbell, so like I said, 40 years of public service, right? So I'm very polite. You can see here on the screen, you know, I congratulate her for public service. It's very, you know, the level of dedication and service to the country. It's truly remarkable and notably commendable, right? So I'm very polite when I send my correspondence to these people. She never answered personally. She only had like only her staff answered, but it's just to give you an idea of like my style. And so there's a whole bunch of different inquiries. It's a little bit messy here because it's mostly links from each of my 3 parts of my series that I link to these, especially in part 3.1 where the transparency people can learn. But you can just browse through them if you want. That's one way. And here it's hard to see the address here, but if I go, I'll see if I go parent directory here, there were some other. There was a really interesting ATIP request by Vanderzalm. He used to be a premier of BC. So I talk about him in I think part 2 or part 3. I think it's part 2. So he had one that was quite revealing because that particular ATI request had even mentions of things like rogue geoengineering, and they had a presentation of Environment and Climate Change Canada on geoengineering from many years ago. And one of the participants asked about, has there been any rogue engineering in Canada? And then the next page was completely redacted. So that means there was definitely something going on. This was like 10, 15 years ago. So you can just imagine maybe what they're doing today. That could be speculation, but so that particular ATIP request was quite revealing, and it is quite a big one too. So I would encourage people, they can take a look at that one. And I can't remember how many pages here. I see 52 pages, so it's quite long. There was the Dan Fournier case also, which I discussed, I think, in my part 2, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't talk about any legal aspects. Maybe somebody else will talk more about some legal things. And then I have some photos. So they're by province. So for example, in my area, I'll have many, okay, that I've taken, or same thing with the video. So I'll link to these from part 1. I'll show you one just for fun. I went to Ottawa last summer and near the Parliament building, and there was one that was just like crazy. Straight up in the air. Okay, so I've never seen like one of these trails go straight up in the air vertically like this, but like that was kind of strange to me. And this is, you can see it was straight here, and then it goes this. These are the east wing of the Parliament building, to the east of the Parliament building, if not mistaken. So anyway, people can have a look. There's some videos as well, so same thing. But the main thing here is communications, so people can look. I have all the ones with NAV Canada and so on. So basically, let me stop the screen share here, and if anybody has any questions, then feel free to ask.
Yeah, Dan, Jerry Pasikla here. I'm from Sylvan Lake, Alberta. And so I find
Polish.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can you repeat your name again? I didn't catch your name. Jerry?
Jerry Pasikla, yeah.
Okay.
Sylvan Lake, Alberta. So I've been following this for quite a while. I got on with Dan Wiggerton and then Jim Lee, and then now with you, which this is really good, this Zoom, because there's a lot of information here, and I've been also following you guys on Geoengineering Free on Telegram, and I've submitted some bunch of photos from Sylvan Lake and photos, and I'm tracking the aircraft with the Flight Radar 24. And what I find interesting is that there's certain jets that leave these streams up there that don't disappear, and it's usually British Airways, Air France, and Condor out of Germany. There's been a few, and Lufthansa. And so like this morning, for instance, 3 jets went over. They left heavy contrails north to south. They were going in one straight from east to west, which I never see jets from east to west. Transponders weren't on. I couldn't get them. I could see the jets. I went outside with the tracker. There's no transponders. The jets is crystal clear. They're leaving, and their streams aren't disappearing. The sky was fairly blue this morning. By 11 o'clock, headed into Red Deer, and the sky was all the contrails just got wider and wider, and the sky was dimmed out. So I'm working with another medical outfit out of Calgary. She took samples of the snow the other day. She comes and stays up. She's been a respiratory nurse for 36 years, and they were taking samples of the snow, and they found a lot of different interesting things in the snow. They've got little kind of little like squiggly looking little worms that are moving if it's in the snow, different types of bacteria. So I'm going to pursue that. We're going to start taking water samples and snow samples, and she puts it under the microscope, and we're going to start figuring out what's going on. She said they're starting to break out what's actually in the different chemicals, and the high amounts of aluminum they found, and the barium. And so I also know Devin Dreeshen there. He's the Minister of Transport for Alberta. So I'm glad that this Zoom happened, because I'd like to get a hold of you, Dan, and start putting some information together. And I'm personally going to go see him and take this package of information and get him working on this. And then because he's connected with Danielle Smith, he sees her all the time. And I'm also working with several groups in Alberta now. Take Back Alberta, Alberta Free, Alberta Prosperity Project. We're all trying to work together with the banking system, Blue Valley Credit Union, to kind of stave off what's coming. And geoengineering is part of it. So, I mean, they're hitting us from several different angles. So, so that's kind of where I'm sitting, and how I'm involved in what I see happening. And so,
yeah, I
Awesome.
respond to like 3 things here that you said. And first of all, like, thank you for sharing that, and do like get in touch with me if you need my contact information. Bettina has it also. Get in touch with me. Share any of this. I want anybody here to share things with me that I can include in part 4, because part 4 is kind of open. It's for updates, it's for addendums. So I'm going to be posting more pictures, more photos, more videos. Now, you mentioned a few things here, and it really sparked my memory here, because this was very, very frequent, especially in October, November, December. Like you said, you could start a day, clear blue sky, not a cloud in the sky, and then they just start spraying the sky, and by 10, 11 o'clock, the whole sky is covered white, which is like it's just totally abnormal. I photographed a few. I'm definitely going to put in the part 4, and on several occasions, 2-3 occasions, these very strange rainbows that are they're almost like, it's almost like a V shape in the sky, and sometimes they go down straight. This is totally abnormal. So definitely chemicals, something going on there. Metals, I should say, maybe. Maybe it's the aluminum. I'm not an expert on this. But this one particular time, I was coming back in my car, and I saw these, and I spotted it about 3-4 kilometers away. It's exactly where I was going. And then when I got to that point, it was a fairly clear sky except for some trails and that particular rainbow. So it was an intersection of trails where there was rainbow. And when I drove right through that, it was like almost like these little particles falling down. It's like sometimes, like if you have like snow dust on the sunny day, on the sunny windy day, but the very, very fine snow. But it was even smaller than that. It was definitely not snow. So it was falling down in like in very big quantity. And I should have maybe drove back to take a sample. I did not take a sample. But this happened on one or two other occasions where I took pictures and video. So that was totally abnormal. And I kind of kicking myself. I should have taken a sample because there was snow from the previous day. So it could have fallen on the snow and I could have easily got a sample. So, and one more point that you mentioned, Danielle Smith. I know for a fact that my work has made it to her office. I don't know for a fact if she read it or not because there's a correspondence with the lawyer and her team, and it was a little bit cold at first, but there was a little bit back and forth. So I do know that my work made it to her office. Whether she's read it or not, it remains to be seen. But if we can get any politician on our side, I mean, that would be helpful, especially in her, because her province, a lot of like there's operations going on that we know of, those that are those that Transport Canada told me about, right?
Well, I know Alberta's getting sprayed big time. They've started over the summer, and it's been actually through, and you can see them. You can see when the clouds break, you can see they're zigzagging across the sky up top in an H pattern and that. So I know Danielle Smith, she's getting bombarded from many different sides about many different things that's happening. She's very much awake. And but she's got she's kind of like Danielle in the Lion's Den. She's got a caucus, half her caucus is ready to take her out. The other side is the NDP, so she walks very carefully and very careful what she says. And she's got a battle going on with Ottawa now with our two friends in Ottawa there. But so but she is wide awake. She knows what's going on, and but she's treading pretty careful. But I know we got a companion, Mo, in Saskatchewan, which is he's kicking butt too. So maybe between the two of them, they could start making things happen. But they're trying to attack the oil industry and everything here. So so they're going to hit Alberta hard and heavy. That's what we expect coming. That's what we figure. So we're doing everything we can to fight back in the councils and getting our people, grassroots people starting to get back into the council, start taking charge of things and turn this thing around.
Yeah. The only caveat I would give to all of this is that our approach should be bottom up, not top down. So yeah, it would be nice to get somebody like Danielle Smith, but I think what would be more effective for our cause would be to increase awareness of the masses, and then at the local level, at the provincial level, then people start demanding answers. That's why my section 3.5 is what can people do? Okay, so I had a couple that they can call their, they can contact their local representatives, but also their provincial representatives or their MPs. They can get water, like sample tests, water and air, and even snow, you said, tests done. Send the test send a copy of the test registered mail with a letter, accompanying polite letter, very professionally written, very cordial, and ask, like, are you aware of these? What do you think the health implications on Albertans or whatever province you are in, right, might be? Have you considered maybe performing some, like, I don't know, environmental tests or air quality tests or things like that? You got to speak their language. And this is advice I got from Jolie Diane, from the Geofree Engineering. I always get the two zero Geoengineering. Sorry. I'm getting old, sorry. So she gave good advice. Is you kind of have to communicate with them on a level that they can understand. So if you talk about health and safety concerns, that's a lot better than if you're complaining or ranting about chemtrails, okay? Because that's not going to get you anywhere. Okay, you got to speak their language. Okay, and so I think we got to be smart about this. And so, like I said, increase awareness, at the local level, get people proactive. They can do like track some flights, the transponders off, like send emails to Transport Canada, send emails to, you know, the Department of National Defense, to Royal Canadian Air Force, to NAV Canada, like, and be public about it, you know. So like the more of us that do these things, the more we increase awareness. But not only that, amongst the population, but we increase awareness amongst the staff of Environment Climate Change Canada, Transport Canada, because probably like most of them have no idea what's going on, and they're just going off, they're just doing their routine, and they're following orders, and they're doing their job and with the information they have at hand, but they might not be privy to a lot of what's going on and a little bit of the bigger picture. But ask many questions when you email them, ask questions, right? So that's my advice. I don't know.
Yeah, I know several pilots, and a couple of them been flying for over 40 years, one just about 50 years, and he said, I've never in all my life seen the skies the way they are. And he said, when you get up in the air, he said, I've never seen trails, he calls them chemtrails. He said, I've never seen them in there like they are now. And so the other thing I do quite a bit is because usually they like to spray during the day or early morning or later in the afternoon, and then the nights usually clear off. So I'll go out about 11, 12 o'clock. I got high powered spotlights. I'll go out and the sky will be totally clear, nothing around. It'll be totally calm. I've done this in the summertime, wintertime, and you shine the light up in the air, and there's all kinds of particles floating around in the air. Some totally clear sky, and then one night was so thick it was actually dropping on the flashlight. So and some days are worse than others. Some nights you don't get a lot, but most of the time there's a lot of stuff floating around. And it's
and this is, can I just quickly interject? Yeah, so this is the two things that are going on: the solar radiation management and the earth radiation management. And this is why you won't find a lot of trails at night, because that's the cloud thinning, right? So they wanted to make sure that the earth radiation is disappearing and it's not blocked by clouds. So they want clouds by day and not by night. And those are the two technologies they use: solar radiation management, earth radiation management, and a third one is the carbon dioxide removal. So Gary, if I may ask you, so we have a presentation ready for to educate people about these technologies here. So and I don't know if you followed us from the beginning, but we raised quite a bit of awareness here in BC by traveling the province. So I've been traveling from Kelowna to Vernon, and Vernon back to the island, and back to Vancouver, and all over the place, to educate people about geoengineering. And with the help of Jim and Nikki Florio, so Jim Lee and Nikki Florio, they always came on and spoke, and they really, they're amazing. So you heard Jim speak, so he knows what he's talking about. But anyway, so if you're interested with your groups that you're a member of, why don't you just set up a meeting with us, and then we can present about geoengineering, so that you also kind of get the term, that's right, what Dan was saying, the right terminology, which we have put together in our presentation. And you can certainly use that's absolutely free for everybody to use. So if you're interested in doing that, then just set up a meeting with a group of people, and then we zoom in, and then we can present about geoengineering, the technologies, and why they are doing what and when and how and whatever else. If that's
no, I'd be interested in doing that. Yeah, for sure.
okay.
So
Awesome. Well, then
your contact.
Our contact, I put that in the chat. It's certainly our website. And the email, hang on, I'll just type that in. The email is geoengineeringfreecanada@proton.me. That's our email, and the website is geoengineeringfreecanada.com. So I think
Yep.
that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, no, I go on there all the time.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for doing
So-
that. And yeah, like I say, just get in contact with us. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one question, okay, I was just a little unclear that Jim Lee was explaining the difference between the spraying in the higher atmosphere versus lower. So now, like, was he saying that the trails that are being left by behind the jets are not chemical spraying?
No, that's not what he's saying. He usually references the jet fuel itself.
Yeah.
So there is additives, or there is the metals are added to jet fuel. So that's part of the jet fuel.
Yeah.
And so what he is saying is that the higher they fly, the longer they stay, because the higher it's a different kind of, well, it behaves differently than lower altitude. So
Yeah,
then go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering there because I was doing some other stuff here and then I just caught that to come back in and caught that with Jim there. So I just wanted a clarification because I was talking like I was talking to another pilot a while back and well, just the other day actually, and we were talking about this and he said that the jet fuels he's on this now too, and he's trying to get some jet fuel to test and because he lives right out by the airport there at Penhold. But like he was saying too, is they got to be careful when they're putting the stuff in, like especially the aluminum. They can use the aluminum for certain parts of the jet for performance and that. But he said if they put too much, it'll start burning that. It'll start working against the jet engine. So he's pretty interested in what's happening and what they're putting into the fuels, eh? So that's
Yeah,
a lot
so
of elements.
we took a fuel sample and took it to a lab in Alberta. Obviously, these kind of labs are in Alberta because of, the fuel industry and oil industry and stuff like that. What we got back here, the results are not very accurate. Obviously, I sent the results to Jim to take a look at, because I don't know how to read these kind of documents, right? And these results. So, and he said to me, well, the problem is that they measured this in milligram per kilogram. And that is not very accurate. So it should be these kind of measures or measurements. They should have done that in ppm and
Mhm.
not in milligram.
Yeah,
And this exactly. And this is, but we got back the milligram. So this is obviously not accurate enough.
Mhm.
So we are working on kind of try and find a different lab which is more independent than the other labs, because they are more or less actually, bought out,
Mhm.
and they are, that's probably what they're doing. Like I say, it was not very obviously not very accurate. So yeah, let's do this another time. We have access to jet fuel again, and then we can take
Yeah.
another.
So I've been in the oil field for all my life, eh? And so I know. I mean, there's a lot of laboratories that do for petroleum industry, like the Suncor uses and places like that. So I can make some calls and get some independent labs involved in it. I know that I got Laboratories is one of the big ones out here, and I don't know how good they are, if they've been infiltrated or bought out or whatever. But I won't use Alberta Health Care Laboratories. I don't trust them. So
Yeah, of course.
for certain reasons, but anyway, so that's kind of where I'm going with it. But it's I'm really glad this Zoom come about because it just connects everything and then start working together and get things happening.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. Is there any other question? Is there anything else?
I don't think at this time. I'm just going to start concentrating on getting information together and work through Devin Dreeshen there and Minister of Transport for Alberta, and we'll just work up the ladder, because he's very accessible, and he's young and he's awake and he's smart, and so he pays attention too. So not like the other transportation minister we got, or the energy minister in Ottawa, whatever.
Yeah, well, good for you. Well, I filed an FOI.
Jerry, a question?
Yep.
Jerry, because you mentioned earlier that you had a contact who was a pilot. Was that pilot in the military before, or just civilian?
No, he's a civilian pilot, but I've got there's a couple guys I know that grew up in this area that have been in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Spent till they retired, and then they went flying. They went commercial flying. So I was thinking of getting a hold of them and just bringing this to their attention too. So,
but the one you were specifically talking about that say he'd never seen like this and like this kind of spraying in 40 years. So is he is still an active pilot, and is it for like main airlines or just small aircraft?
He's just him and his son, they got a private plane and they fly.
Okay.
He's been in the oil field for years. He's my cousin actually, and he's flying. And then like we talk about this all the time. At first he didn't. We started talking about the geoengineering, and he knew there's something going on. And then the more he got involved in it, like he said now, like he said, he's never seen the skies like they are up there now in all his years flying.
I mean, I'm 56 years old, and like I don't remember seeing it like any of this when I was younger. Like, no way. And there was one, like even the correspondence I had with the Royal Canadian Air Force pilot. At one point, he sent me a link to a video that this guy in a video so-called debunks that these are not quote unquote chemtrails. I hate to use that term because it's not necessarily the proper term, but he said, oh, they're contrails like produced by airplanes. And he has a whole series of books, and he goes back like to the 1960s and 1950s. But I actually debunk his video I think it's in my part 1. People can check it out because I linked to it, okay, it's a good argument. Let's hear all the arguments. Let's put it all on the table. But I actually debunked a lot of what he said in that video, which doesn't make sense. And people can read that particular section if they want to see how I kind of debunk that. But yeah, the point being is like here, like if it were possible to get like either an active or retired like airline pilot, and just simple statements like you just said, I haven't seen this like in 40 years, or when I was 20 years ago, we did not see this in the sky. And somebody with enough technical knowledge that could say, because there's always the argument, oh, well, like aircraft are more sophisticated now. They use different like types of jet fuel. They use different types of technology. The condensation is different. Like we're not experts in this. So if we can have somebody who can actually, give the real information about that, and for comparative purposes of like 20 years ago or whatever, that we didn't see these. That would be really helpful if we can find some kind of pilot. So if anybody has contacts, that would be great.
I probably do, because I know just talking about that now, I just come to my memory that I know his uncle very well. I worked with him, but I just remember this Tim, his nephew. He took his commercial pilot's license, and he now flies a commercial airliner. So he lives in Eckville here, just 10 minutes from me. So I'll just make note of that. I'm going to get a hold of him and get him involved, because he's currently he's flying commercial airlines today. So I totally
I mean, I would like, if they're willing to speak, great, because my feeling is that active, like it's almost like in the military, in the military, of course they have to follow orders, and they have to keep quiet about things. It could be the same in civilian airspace. I don't know. It's hard to say, but that's why if we have like retired pilots, maybe they're more willing to share information about that than active pilots, because active pilots could get in trouble, with their superiors, and we saw this kind of nonsense with COVID and with the pilots getting the jabs and all and things like that. So they could tend to maybe keep their mouth shut more and not disclose anything. But we need some pilots because they're going to be some of the more credible witnesses or people that we can draw upon, and that'll have a little bit more clout too. So if we can get some, and there must be some, come on, maybe people, I hope more people are listening and get in touch. If you're pilots, feel free to get in touch. If pilots want to get in touch with me anonymously, I have secure communications. They can go on my Substack about page. They can contact me anonymously. We got to get some. Anonymous is better than nothing, but if people are willing to go on a record, that's what we need. And let's work together, and we have some problems to solve and we have some questions to answer. Let's do it together in respectful fashion with each other, and not blame each other about being a conspiracy theorist or whatever. We're all adults and we can have respectful conversations, including with our politicians and public servants. Let's work together and let's try to get the bottom of some of these things, because I think it's just I write a lot about the globalist agendas, like CBDCs, digital IDs, and all things like that, and how we have corruption in government with politicians and how they can be coerced. But a lot of the time they just really don't know what's going on. So that's but if they had the information, then maybe they'd say, heck, I didn't know this was going on. Maybe I need to look into this, or maybe we need to start keeping people to account. That's what we need in our system, with our politicians. I mean, we need honest people that are gonna be honest, right?
Well, I think things are changing. I think I've noticed a big difference, especially in the geoengineering part. I mean, more people are looking up in the skies. More people are aware of that now from a year ago, and I run into people all the time now that are talking about it. They see there's changes. They see there's something taking place. Sometimes they don't quite know what it is, but they are starting to talk more and more about it, and people are agreeing that this climate change or this climate process or scam is all exactly what it is a scam, and it's not happening. It's just a political money grab, and so people are starting to get the truth out. More people are waking up all the time, so I think that's a positive thing. Another thing I was going to ask, no, I think this is more geoengineering free. So there's also I was reading one of your flyers saying that I think it says 2 Saturdays from now or whatever to everybody to go to the City Hall and in regards to 5G.
Yeah, we are putting on a 5G rally. So we are based in Kelowna, obviously, Kelowna, BC, and we want to go to protest out front City Hall, and I would like to see that nationwide, of course, Canada-wide. And I'm just I started working on some sort of an information package for people. I put that on the website as well, and I will share it as well in our newsletter again, so people can download this, print it off. So just information about how harmful 5G is, so that we can demand removal of the 5G towers. And one of our most amazing experts regards 5G is Professor Mokta Havas. And she spoke at our July event last year. Her presentation is absolutely phenomenal. And we've got that on our YouTube channel, because I recorded everything and then I put these presentations up on our YouTube channel. And you can actually just pull it up and listen to her presentation. It's absolutely incredible. So and on her website, which is magdahavas.com, very easy, straightforward, magdahavas.com, and you'll find some information about geoengineering there as well. And I just pulled that information out and I put it in PDF documents, so and put it all together in one package, so you guys can then just download it and then use it for information purposes, either hand it out or talk about it or something like that, because that's what we want. We want to demand, or we do demand, that the cities take down these 5G towers. That's the purpose of that rally. And yeah, so we're going to do that in Kelowna for sure.
Just on a quick note, two things that I've tried and they work. If anybody's concerned about EMF, if you get shungite, it's a rock, and it's the only thing they've done tests on it. It's the only thing that can actually deter the harmful radiation coming from the towers. I've got a EMF RF reader. And I put shungite in the back of my iPhone. When I take the shungite away from the phone goes off the chart on the reading. As soon as I put the shungite in the back of the phone, it goes to normal. So it doesn't.
What is that stone you call it?
Shungite.
How to spell that?
SHUGITE, shungite. And silver shungite or elite shungite is the best. It's not very expensive, but you can go to any rock store and ask for shungite. And they've done tests on it. There's a guy that's been doing testing. He's worked in the testing business for all his life, and he tried all the stuff on the market that they claim works. And he said shungite is the only thing he found out that actually will stop the radiation from or protect you. Wow. And it doesn't take much. It just takes a little bit to stop that.
It's funny because my young son, he collects rocks, and he has like 400 or 500 different types of rocks, and I hear about all these kinds of rocks and never heard about shungite. So wow, okay, so maybe we should all buy a necklace or something like that. That could like help. Can I make a quick point on what you were saying about the climate scam, or however you want to put it there? In my part 2, and there's many like things I talk about. I do talk about 5G in part 1 too, and I talk about EMF readers and things like that. But just to make one point, and I could always show it, or maybe I can do it. Let me do a screen share here. Because I have a section in part 2, and I'll just take a minute here. It's under climate alarmism, and there's something, I have a subsection called carbon taxes. So let me just do a quick screen share here. I think should be here. Can you see carbon taxes on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So here, actually, okay, there's climate alarmism, right? So here, I mean, we all know about carbon taxes. It's been in the news, right, in 2023. But in late 2020, Trudeau's government set even more aggressive plans to hike the carbon tax to $170 a ton by 2030, and so on, right, from $30 a ton 2020. So I linked to this article here. But what's really interesting here is an article from the Counter Signal. And actually, I did write for a few months for the Counter Signal, which is in your neck of the woods. I wrote several articles for them last year. Or last year, the year before. I think to some in my about page, I think. But basically, one of my former colleagues here, Mike Campbell, he's a really good reporter. So he came out with this article that liberals paid the World Economic Forum for a report justifying climate change policy, so they could justify the carbon tax. You can't make this up, right? And this was found out by it was a special I forget what it's called. It's called it might have been Leslie Lewis who did this. It's an inquiry. It's what do you call it? Not a inquiry question or something. I forget the exact term of it, but anyway, just here, for example, here in August 2019, Environment and Climate Change Canada's Department, then Minister Catherine McKenna gave nearly $500,000 of taxpayer dollars to the WEF to produce this report. And I linked to the report, and they always do these reports, right? How are we going to solve these problems? And here's the solution. And you know, the WEF are really good at producing the report. But what's really kind of disgusting here is they use our taxpayer money to kind of sneakily go by the WEF so they can, you know, come back and, oh, well, they said that, you know, it's a good idea. Maybe we should have carbon taxes to mitigate this or that, or you can see how these shenanigans are going on. So basically, I just give a few examples here. Oh, it's an order paper question. That's what I was looking for here from Leslie Lewis. And it's question 1689, because these are all tracked, right? So people can go and take a look at them if they want. I don't know if this is the specific one, maybe. Let me see. Yeah, I think this is probably the one. Yeah, it's a little bit small. My eyes aren't too good here, but I think this is probably the one in question here. So that's just an example of the kinds of things they're up to. And like, don't get me started on Stephen Guilbeault, because actually earlier in my post, I do talk about climate alarmism, and I'm sure you all have seen him in his orange jumpsuit here. And his little shady past there. So, I mean,
at least one thing for sure, history will probably repeat himself, because that's probably where he'll end up.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll keep my personal opinions to myself now. People can have a look at my work. I rather just let my work speak for itself, and don't want to berate people right directly publicly like this, but people can form their own opinions on how genuine these people are. So anyway, I just wanted to share that little point with you.
Well, he's not very well liked in Alberta, let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, I guess so. Anyway, any other questions? Anybody have any questions? Feel free.
Well, I think that was great. I don't know. Is there anything else? Then I can stop the recording, and I would like to thank everybody. Or is there anything else we should discuss? Feel free. Oh,
hi.
Spot. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Maya, and I'm from Ontario. I'm actually in Toronto, and that are you still there?
Yeah, we are here.
Oh, okay. No, sorry, something else came up over here. And then we all know how deep is this, right? We know how much power all these people have to manage all this. I don't even have a word to say it really. For me, is like an evil thing. I don't know how they can do this to humanity, actually, to have all these chemtrails going around the world and doing the damage that they are doing. And I just came back from a trip from Colombia, and from Toronto to Colombia, and I know it's happening everywhere, right? Like, during the trip, I saw it. I went back home and I saw how the damage that they are doing. And how can we stop this? I know that you guys are doing a lot of work going to local authorities and everything, but how we actually can stop this? Like, I don't know if I'm bad or here or very pessimist or something, but I don't see the way that how we can stop this, the power that they do have.
Well, we can, this question comes up all the time. How can we stop it? Well, number one, we can only stop it when we work as a team here and present and raise as much awareness as we possibly can to the public, to our officials, and we must keep working on it day by day, 24/7. And we must not stop. We cannot stop working on this. This is unfortunately, it takes time. It's not going to happen just tomorrow or within the next hour or so. But as long as we again raise more awareness, and then with organizations like ours, or Dan's work, Jim or Nikki's work, or Ian's work, or whoever is working on this specific topic, then we can hopefully again work as a team and then find the people that we can actually really hold accountable, because we can only start legal action, for example, when we have names. We need names in order to start a lawsuit, to hold people accountable, because there must be somebody giving that order. Okay, spray now in the military, because that, see, and this, we got to find those people, but unfortunately that's certainly not easy. But again, as soon as we start working as a team, and here we are in BC, Dan is in Quebec, then Jerry's in Alberta, so all over the globe, as we come together as a coalition, as one, then we might have a chance to, and we will, absolutely, we will have a chance to find those people. It's just, again, it takes time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
I just put in the chat window, like one action at a time. I mean, little actions, they have ripple effects, right? I mean, Jerry was mentioning earlier that they were maybe taking some snow samples. Okay, that's great. I mean, just little actions like that. Sure, if you take samples and you might have to pay $100 or so for a test. Okay, maybe not everybody can do that, but if you don't have money, there's other things you can do, right? Talk to your neighbor. Ask them, hey, what do you think? What do you think's going on up there? You know, just ask them some questions.
Stayed on this time.
Yeah, I actually do that a lot. Like, you know, I tell the people, and I take a lot of pictures. I show it to the kids. I tell the kids, ask your parents, what is this? So to try, because I work at school, so I just try to, you know, to call their attention. We need to call that generation attention for them to start getting involved, right? So the other thing that I was gonna ask you was, do you have people in Ontario that maybe we can contact with, and maybe we start working together?
Yeah, I personally don't have many contacts. Maybe Bettina has more contacts in Ontario, I think.
Yeah. We can put you in touch with people. Yes.
I was just gonna.
What's interesting is Mexico doesn't let this happen over Mexico. So I would like to know how Mexico is not allowing this to happen over their territory. So that might be a good place to start.
I think
so if you know any. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's 3 countries now that have stopped the spraying over them. Mexico was one, and I do believe there's 2 other countries that just stopped it. I'd have to check my notes and.
Yeah. Well, what are they doing? Yeah, what are they doing, and who could we talk to down there to actually get some ideas on how to influence our government? Says, hey, this is not happening in Mexico, or let's say another Central American country, or wherever. I think that'd be a good idea to try to pinpoint that as a resource.
That's a good idea, and I do actually have a contact, which we can.
I do have a contact in Mexico too. I need to because I was on a podcast with him. His name, if you guys ever listen to TNT Radio, his name is Hervoye Morik, and he's been living in Mexico for a while. And I've been meaning to ask him, but it was very tight because his live radio. When I did the interviews with him, I did two interviews with him. But I need to try to get in contact with him. And I'm actually starting my own podcast this year, so I'm going to try to have him on as a guest. Maybe we can talk about this because, yeah, they have it on paper. They're not doing a geoengineering in Mexico, but is that really true? I mean, like, is that really the case? Because just look at what happened at Acapulco not that long ago, right?
Yeah.
I was a guest that if you guys are familiar with SGT Report, I was a guest on SGT Report. It's in my the link is in my about page on my Substack, and I was talking to the host. We were exchanging on what happened in Mexico there, in Acapulco, because that was definitely not like definitely didn't seem natural. So
Well,
I
they
didn't
might
dig into that too much. Something's going on there. Did the Mexican government permit that to happen? Like, who did
well,
that?
that might have originated 200 miles offshore, right? You know, and then you know, international airspace, right? I think that's, to me, that's the conclusion I came to about Mexico.
Yeah, I'd have to investigate, do more digging
I don't
there,
know.
which I didn't do, but
Yeah.
it was definitely not natural. So I mean, so what's the real story in Mexico? Is there like zero spraying there? Like, what's going on? Like we need more contacts maybe over there to see. I don't know.
Well,
It'd be an interesting case to learn more about.
Yeah, my question is how can they stop this, because there is planes flying over Mexico. You cannot stop them from flying over the country. So whatever is in their jet fuel and whatever is well, it's probably the military that might not be allowed to fly over Mexico. I don't know if they shut down the airspace for the military. I'm not sure. But how can you stop the commercial aviation from flying over this country? I think that's impossible. So I don't know. I don't know how can
Well,
I was gonna,
well, what they got is they had I don't know if you remember this, but they had Russian Air Force flying over Mexico for the first time last year. Russian Air Force and Chinese Air Force flying over Russia or flying over Mexico. So there's some sort of arrangement there. And I think they may be using, they may not actually have a very efficient Air Force down there, but they're allowing the Russians and the Chinese to fly over their airspace, military. So that could be it. I don't know.
I quickly Googled this, you guys, and it's talking about solar geoengineering, not spraying. It's a different story altogether. It's not the spraying. They still probably do that, but it's solar geoengineering that they called for the ban of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I posted a link in the chat.
Yeah.
So
I
there's
also
many
know,
different kinds, obviously, not just the spraying. That's many different levels, of course.
I also know a lady in,
See if you can go on the link, Maya.
I also know a lady in Costa Rica, and I speak with her once in a while, and she said that she doesn't see any spraying in Costa Rica over the skies, no chemtrails or anything like that. So.
And I used to live in China. I lived in China from 2008 to late 2021, and in the big cities, massive spraying. I was in the city Shenzhen, across the border from Hong Kong, massive spraying there. In my wife's hometown, Wuhan, when we would go over there, I would like witness a lot of spraying too. Very, very bad. Maybe it's not related. They're probably not related, but very bad smog too. Air pollution is absolutely terrible there. So it's definitely happening. I mean, China's been pretty open about different programs they've had, like with the Olympics and what they do way out in Western China. They have like all kinds of stations to modify the weather there too. So they're heavily involved with that. I don't know if they're necessarily involved in other countries or over the South China Sea or different places like that. It wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, just to make the note, when I lived in China, there's massive spraying. I documented it. I took a lot of pictures actually, and documented a lot of and video too when I was there. So just a
Wow.
little parentheses there.
Wow.
I was
Yeah,
just, I was gonna make one more comment is tracking the jets that go over central Alberta and that we get a lot of flights from WestJet. And I've yet to see any kind of spraying coming out of WestJet. And they do flights into the States all over the place. So I mean, and it's interesting, and they're flying the same altitude as Lufthansa. And Lufthansa's a WestJet went over one time, they're flying the same altitude, and right behind it was a Lufthansa, and it left a big wide chemtrail or spray.
Yeah, it depends. I don't know. I do suspect that some certain airlines, they must be adding something. Maybe Jim would have better information on this, because I noticed that Air Canada Rouge,
The
for
charge
one
never happened.
particular reason, they seem to have some. So I don't know.
I just waited.
I see a lot of Alaska Airlines. Like I've recorded like literally tons of stuff. I got hundreds of videos, hundreds of photographs. I use ADSB, and I tell you something, I track, like I'm busy all the time. Whenever I see a street going across, I actually saw three FedEx planes go right over my location right at the same time, spraying. Like they're at about 35,000 feet. And the chemical trails are like just literally 30 miles long. And then I go to ADSB and I just, okay, take a picture, take a video. I'll go to my ADSB. I can tell you exactly, there's 3 FedEx jets going straight across. And Alaska is the biggest perpetrator. FedEx was kind of an interesting one because they came from the Northeast and went right over my location last summer. And I got a spectacular video of that one. But Alaska is probably the worst. I've never seen WestJet do it. I've never seen Air Canada do it, but lots of foreign aircraft do it. That includes UAE, Qatar, Germany, Singapore was a big one. I got him on live, right? And on ADSB, recorded the whole thing. Huge freaking contrail right over my location. So it's I don't know why it's kind of selective in a way, and it's not always the same aircraft, but it seems to be not WestJet and not Air Canada that I can see so far.
I
Interesting.
traveled. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Suzanne. Is there anything
No, I
else?
just said interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, I traveled the US last November, and I quite frankly, the spraying or the pollution down there was worse than here in Canada. It was absolutely incredible how I don't know why the sky was dimmed. It was completely white. So mission accomplished. You know, there was absolutely almost no sunshine, like a sun, right? Sun and blue skies, and nothing. It was absolutely nothing like this. They were spraying like crazy, and there's lots more air traffic, obviously, in the States anyway happening. But it was absolutely unbelievable, and I instantly, I mean, I developed a little bit of these symptoms like coughing and the headache and that kind of stuff when they start, flying. And down in the States, it was nonstop, nonstop. I was coughing and sneezing and headache, and oh my gosh, it was brutal down in the States. So it's even worse here in Canada.
Yeah, I can't. I just can't see. It's been so. I relate it back to November of 2021, and that's when they began spraying in Canada in earnest. I live right on the Sunshine Coast here. I've never seen a blue sky turn white. Like there's like beautiful blue skies in 2018, 19, and now you can't even see them anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And like I say, headaches, coughs, sore throat, all kinds of stuff. I mean, we're being chemically poisoned, okay? So there's no question in my mind. There's a purpose behind it, and it ain't good for us, right? So I'm surprised that people, I talk to people that are well aware of it, and they don't say a freaking word. Like I brought it up in a conversation yesterday, and I just want to say, you know what? You have any idea what's causing that? And she says, yeah, I know. I said, then I started talking a little bit, and then all three people kind of opened up a little bit. They know, but a lot of people ain't talking about it. But the thing is, it is making a lot of people sick. And they did a pretty good job over the Christmas holidays, making a lot of people sick. Believe me, a lot of people were sick here in Fall or Seashell this fall or this winter Christmas season.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat here. It's called map.geoengineeringmonitor.org. When you click on that link, it prompts you to a map where all kinds of geoengineering projects are mapped out. So this also might help to identify these different type of chemtrails, for example. Well, chemtrails, we know why we use chemtrails, right? So this is our terminology here. Because a friend of mine, he posted a picture of a chemtrail, which is kind of black, and then it turned white. And so and I was talking to Nikki about this as well, about the different type or the different colors of these chemtrails, and she said, yeah, it depends on the project they are flying. So obviously there is these different additives to the jet fuel, and depending on the project they are obviously putting on there or flying or something like that, then the color of the chemtrail is different. So that might be an interesting site and map to look at. It's actually it is done by the ETC group, and the ETC group is out of Canada, by the way. They are from Quebec too. Maybe Dan, maybe you would like to contact.
Wait.
Quebec.
What is ETC group again? You said
ETC group. The ETC group. They their project. Their big project was Hands of Mother Earth.
okay.
Hands off Mother Earth, eh?
Hands of Mother Earth.
Hands of
Hands.
Mother
Hands of
Earth.
Mother Earth.
Take a note of
Yeah.
it. Hands of Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
These good guys,
so
are they on our
what
side?
are they exactly? ETC group. What's their purpose? You said.
Well, again, those are it's more like an environmental type group, but so don't use the C word as well. So don't use the chemtrails, because obviously there is something they don't I don't know, they just don't use those terms. But Hands of Mother Earth is their biggest project, and they were one of the only ones, according to Jim, if I remember this correctly, those were the ones that actually were able to stop one of those geoengineering projects once. But again, look at their etcgroup.org. That's correct, Suzanne.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah, and they've got some really interesting projects going on as well.
Oh, okay. I'll have a look at that then.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. So you said they're based in Quebec?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And who funds them? Did you look into that or?
No, I haven't. No, but
Always, here's a general rule for everybody. Always follow the money.
I know.
Yeah.
No,
that's
Jim is in contact with them, so Jim knows
okay.
a lot more about the ETC
Okay.
group. But he pointed those out as well, and I contacted
Okay.
them a long time ago, but they never got back to me. But anyway,
Okay.
so yeah, so Jim is working with them as well, or in
okay.
contact. Let's put it this way. Yeah.
Okay. Then maybe I don't. I'm just making that comment because I don't know about that because I'm my first instinct is I'm always skeptical of any organization, especially if they're an environmental organization. That's my first instinct, and it's who funds them. So apologies if
Yeah.
if
No, yeah,
if I'm a
absolutely.
little bit that's just
Yeah.
my nature as an investigator, I guess.
Absolutely. No, that's very legit. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I'll look into that. Mm.
Yeah, so that might be a good other way of research, doing some research, what they are doing. It's the same with the CO2 coalition. The CO2 coalition, that is obviously but really a good group,
They're
but
good.
they are not really connecting the dots from the CO2 to geoengineering. So there's obviously something missing.
Yeah, there's quality people there, definitely. I'll link to some of them. I can't remember if I made a post about the Quebec wildfires too. I can't remember if it was in that post or another post that I linked to some of their work there. You know, because you got these guys Hopper and what's the other Korean guy? I forget his name. Like these these are really the top of the notch researchers in these fields there.
Sun
What's
Moon
his
or
name?
something like that.
Oh,
Sun Moon
I
or
have
something.
such a bad memory, but what's his name? I'd have to find it there, but I don't have it off the top of my head. Is it Poon, Willie Poon, or Willie Soon?
Yeah, that's it. That's yeah, Willie Soon, I think, or Willie Poon or something. Yeah.
Willie Soon or Willie Poon, yeah, and Hopper,
Yeah.
and there's a couple other ones and I have a post on my Substack where I interviewed Alan McRae, also, who's a Canadian energy expert in Alberta. He was actually born in Quebec, but I interviewed him, and like, for example, one question I asked him is like about the carbon taxes. So I asked him like, well, like, Canada's collecting all this information, all these funds from carbon taxes. Do the funds actually go to some environmental programs, or do they just go in the government coffers? And he said they just go in the government coffers. And my suspicion is a lot of these funds are going outwards to outside our country, to other organizations, because they do that with the Gavin Vaccine Alliance. In one of my posts, I can't remember which post it was. I made a long series on the comparison between COVID-19 and the Holocaust. It might have been in that one, or it had been another one. But basically, Canada till 2025 had committed, I think it was at least $4 billion. This is just money that's going to be wasted, going in Bill Gates' direction with his Gavi Vaccine Alliance, and they're just plundering us. I mean, like, this is absolutely abhorrent. But anyway, I'm getting on the side tangent, so apologies there.
Not a problem.
Well, they're foreign like every level of government, from municipal to federal, are foreign agents now. They're not working for the people that we pay taxes. We're feeding the beast. That's what we're doing. And they're no longer working for the people. So they're foreign agents. They're working for foreign agents. I mean, there's groups in BC that are questioning their mayor's loyalty. Who do you work for? Like, they're asking, who are you working for? You work for the people of the community, or you're working for a foreign agency? And you're going to find out they're actually working for global mayors and the WEF, right? So why are we paying their wages? That's the thing. I mean, like, yeah, we're funding our own demise here, which is, got to think about that, right? So.
All right, everybody, it's 8 o'clock is their our time, so it's 11 o'clock your time, Dan. So
Okay,
no
problem.
Okay, good. Well, anyway, is there anything else, any other question, any other comment that would be appreciated? If not,
I've got one last thing to say, and you might think it's a little hokey pokey, but we're dealing with there's a guy got an acreage up there, a group of people at Leduc, and they're doing this right now. The guy that I know, that the pilots, he's doing this on his place, and I've done it on my place, and we're seeing good results with it. and it started out as with copper rods, and if you put them in a small copper rod coiled in a plant, that plant will grow phenomenally. And what it does is creates an energy field. So what I did in my place is I put you take copper wire and you wind it around a wooden stake, you pound it in the ground. So I've got mine about 4 or 5 feet out of the ground, and I've placed them. My acreage is a rectangular, so I placed them so many feet around. I've got 15 of them around the acreage. Since I've done that, there's lots of spraying going on upside, but what happens is the sky clears above the acreage, and I'm not getting the particles at night when I go out anymore, which I didn't tell you earlier. I have to go 3 or 4 miles down the road to get them particles, eh? The guys up in Leduc, they live right by the airport. They said since they put these copper rods up, they're not getting any contamination over their acreage anymore. So it's just a note we're still working, experimenting with, but it seems to be working really well. So
Awesome.
just wanted to say that.
Cool.
Yeah, I've heard of that actually.
All right. Well, then I think I'll just stop the recording. And I do that right now.